is overrun with sharp inequalities. With financial instability and pressing environmental challenges, it's time to rethink our future. We bring smart discussions to the table, mapping the benefits of a circular economy, discovering innovation for the future, meeting our climate change promises, preparing for the future of tourism. Join changemakers from across the world for 2 days of inspiration, green impact, and sustainable innovation.
Good morning to everyone joining us today via Zoom or watching us via our YouTube or Facebook channels. Welcome to the second day of the first fully online edition of the Green Days. I'm Radica Zekovic from the United Nations Development Programme, and I'm very happy to welcome you all this morning on behalf of the organizers, the Government of Montenegro, the Chamber of Economy of Montenegro, and the United Nations Development Programme. At Green Days 2020, we welcome the people who are tackling the greatest challenges facing the world today. But before we begin with our first panel discussion, our technical host, Sanja, will share with us a few etiquette tips to ensure a better experience for all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sanja Gardashevich from a digital agency, Alicorn. The working languages of the conference are English and Montenegrin, and interpretation is available for all of you joining us on the call today. To activate this option, click the interpretation icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select a language channel. Attendees can select an audio channel to hear their language of choice, English if you need English, or Spanish if you need Montenegrin translation. You will hear the translated audio and can also choose if you want to hear the original audio at a lower volume.
We must act decisively to protect our planet from both the coronavirus and the existential threat of climate disruption.
The debate is over about whether or not climate change is real, as it is already having a significant impact on ecosystems, economies, and our communities. Climate change is the challenge of our time. The people and places we care about are affected by it. At Green Days 2020, we believe we can fight this challenge and build a safer and more resilient future for people and nature, also by keeping our climate promises. Our first panel discussion for today is Turning Promises into Action. The panel moderator, Mr. Goran Svilanovic, a diplomat from Serbia, is joining us from Sarajevo, I believe. Good morning, Mr. Svilanovic.
Good morning to you, Radica. Thank you very much to you, to UNDP guys in Montenegro, as well as to Montenegro and the Chamber of Commerce from Montenegro. I'm extremely happy to be joining you once again. Last year it was a lovely event, and I trust it is going to be as interesting as it was and even better this time. I like to say that I'm really excited that yesterday up to 400 people were following the event, co-organized by all of you. And I'd like to congratulate to you, but also to these people who were following, as I trust that these people are those who, even in this very specific situation, thanks to pandemic, to the COVID, really care for another, as Greta Thunberg was saying only very recently, another huge issue. She was reflecting on housing on fire, and I think that these are the people who really believe and trust her words and really want to learn what has been done by the government officials, what has been done by the society, as well as the UN-led system, including the EU, which has a big stake in this process, in order to try to respect and to fulfill the promises. I'd like to present in a minute our today's co-panelist. It is Ivan Avrinovic, who is State Secretary in the government of Montenegro. even though he's the one responsible really for the chapter 27, and I highly appreciate the fact that those who do the job are here to join us and explain how far did they go in turning promises into reality. Nikola Vujovic, who is also in the government of Montenegro, trying to help the process as well. Nikola Vujovic is State Secretary in the Ministry of Economy, but Nikola, we highly appreciate your knowledge and experience regarding the energy. Therefore, we're going to hear from you also what the government has been doing so far in order to really meet the promises regarding the CO2 and GHG emissions. And Herman Spitz, also a very experienced diplomat from European Union, being serving in different countries and currently heading the operations in the EU delegation in Montenegro. So these are the people. From you, Herman, we're going to hear something about the Green Deal, something which left the room also for the Balkans to join, including tiny state of Montenegro, which is actually very advanced in the process of negotiations and has a lot to lose and to win in the process. But before we hear from you, I'd like to introduce the keynote speaker, Pradip Surya, who actually is executive coordinator for Environmental Finance Bureau and the program support in a global policy network in the UNDP. Well, Pradip is the one who is actually taking a leadership in this organization and is overseeing, 200 policy and technical advisors located in different countries worldwide and who are directly engaged in the UNDP's engagement all over the world. Well, he has also overall responsibility for the strategic leadership and management of UNDP's engagement within the global environmental vertical funds. Some of them are used in our area, GEF, for instance, and the others as well. So we'd like to hear from him, and I'd like to invite him to start with the keynote presentation. Unfortunately, not in the studio, so to say, with us, but still very much supporting our work. So, Radica, can we hear from Pradip?
Yes.
Dear Deputy Prime Minister, President of the Chamber of Economy, my fellow distinguished panelists, Ivana Vojinovic, General Director for the Environment, Ministry of Sustainable Development and Tourism, Nikola Vujovic, State Secretary, Ministry of Economy, and Herman Spitz, Head of the Cooperation Section, Delegation of the European Union to Montenegro, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to have the opportunity to participate in the 2020 Green Days Conference. Please allow me to thank the Government of Montenegro, the Chamber of Commerce, and my fellow colleagues at UNDP for inviting me to join you in this important discussion and recognize the significance of this year's theme, Rethinking Development. Indeed, we're at a historic inflection point where all aspects of life, all sectors of the economy, and previous approaches to international cooperation and development requires a rethink. Ultimately, this means a recalibration of social and economic and environmental policies, a reallocation of public and private finance and investments, many examples of which we have already seen in the past few months in the immediate response to COVID-19, but which we recognize must go a much further and longer way in order to catalyze the green and sustainable recovery that we all need and to ensure we build back better. Today I want to talk about how this type of green transformation and economic growth is possible by leveraging our natural capital and where the opportunities are for Montenegro. First, allow me to set the scene with a recent quote from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He said, "We must act quickly and decisively to protect people and strengthen societies in the face of this shock, which comes on top of a global climate emergency, soaring inequality, and growing discontent with the economic and social order in general." Ladies and gentlemen, we are having this conversation at a time when the unthinkable has happened. The insurance industry refers to this as a 1-in-100-year event. However, we actually did know that a COVID-like event was only a matter of time. Just a few years ago, the G7 nations met for a scenario planning exercise that specifically explored the possibility of a global pandemic. Many others across science, academia, philanthropy warned that a pandemic was imminent. Yet, as we have seen, governments around the world, businesses, and the international development community have been ill-prepared to deal with the scale and impacts of the outbreak. Colleagues, we cannot be gathered here a year from now regretting a failure to adequately prepare for another major crisis of our lifetime, climate change. We know the root causes of COVID-19 are ultimately the same as the root causes of climate change. That is, an unsustainable model of development based on an ever-growing exploitation of natural resources that pushes against the limits and capacities of natural systems, and it's wreaking havoc on biodiversity and the life support systems on which we all depend. Today, less than 25% of the land surface on Earth is free from the substantial impacts of human activities, a lot of it not in nature's favor, and certainly not in our favor. Our expanding footprint on the natural environment dramatically multiplies the risk to people and planet. More than 60% of new infectious diseases and almost all recent pandemics originate in animals, with most coming from wildlife to human transmissions. We're getting daily warning shots from record temperatures and climatic-induced disasters, be it floods, droughts, wildfires, heat waves, all of which Montenegro has experienced. In April, millions of people across Asia Pacific who were already struggling with dealing with the pandemic were also struck by Tropical Cyclone Harold, which leveled key healthcare facilities and left countless homeless. Last week, temperatures in the Russian Arctic town of Verkhoyansk soared to a record 38 degrees Celsius. Ladies and gentlemen, if we needed more proof that we are breaching the planetary boundaries upon which all people and economies depend, we have got it in plenty. So where do we go from here? The good news is that in recognizing the links between climate change and COVID, we also see that solutions to both are also fundamentally similar. We must rebalance our relationship with the environment, both through mitigation and smart adaptation activities. We must deploy and in some cases reallocate inefficiently used resources such as those going for fossil fuel subsidies that are now locking countries into unsustainable growth trajectories and discouraging private sector investments and innovations in clean and renewable energy. We must not only think about restoring jobs lost from COVID, but creating new opportunities, especially for the informal sector and for women and youth-led enterprises. Luckily, we have a roadmap on how to get there, agreed by all nations. This roadmap, of course, is the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Change Agreement give us the targets we need to steer a course towards a just, equitable, and prosperous human development, one that is in sync and positively leverages our planet's rich and diverse natural capital. The lockdowns induced by COVID-19 proved the false dichotomy of perceived trade-offs between economic growth and environmental and societal health and well-being. Governments and businesses around the world are starting to get this message. Most notably, the European Union, through the Green Deal, is using the crisis as an opportunity to deliver transformational change that is guided by the science of the Paris Agreement and puts in place the building blocks for sustainable development, green recovery, and development. Please allow me to acknowledge again Herman Spitz, my fellow panelist from the EU, and congratulate this demonstration of leadership which aims for the EU to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. So what does all of this mean for Montenegro? Let's start by exploring why climate change commitments and contributions of small countries such as Montenegro, which account for less than 0.1% of global greenhouse gases emissions, matter. First, we need the cooperation and commitment of all nations to recover from COVID. and keep global temperatures from exceeding the 1.5 degrees Celsius rise enshrined in the Paris Agreement. These are not and must not be seen as mutually exclusive efforts. International cooperation is more important and urgent than ever before, and COVID-19 has demonstrated that. Second, and as I have mentioned earlier, Montenegro is highly vulnerable to the multiple socioeconomic and environmental impacts of climate change, as seen in a series of floods and droughts over the past decade and previously. Third, as the EU's Green Deal demonstrates, economic recovery must look beyond the short and medium term to create new opportunities for innovation and inclusion. For example, with COVID having had a major impact on tourism, which is among the fastest growing sectors for Montenegro's economy, there's an essential fiscal case for building back better and creating new livelihood opportunities through a clean energy transition. This will open up new pathways for a capabilities revolution and opportunities for small and medium-sized enterprises and women-led businesses. As I think you heard from my colleague Daniela Gasparikova, nearly 2/3 of working-age women in the Western Balkans region are either inactive or unemployed, thus limiting the true potential for economic growth. The World Bank estimates that GDP in the Western Balkan countries could be 20% higher if women were to participate in the labor market at the same level as men do. Now allow me to unpack this further and consider how can emissions reductions and nature-based solutions drive green growth. In 2018, 77% of Montenegro's energy consumption was from renewables. In this regard, Montenegro's investments into renewables may serve as a springboard for achieving carbon neutrality in years to come, thus being ahead of the countries which have been delaying necessary reforms in this area. Another important element of the EU's Green Plan that is relevant for Montenegro is the transition away from fossil fuels through improved energy efficiency, as well as better organization of the electricity market. This will not only enable economic growth, but also reduce the cost of electricity, thus eliminating energy poverty. One way of achieving this is by giving more choices to consumers, individual and households and small businesses and others, when it comes to energy providers, and giving customers the possibility to produce electricity themselves from renewable sources and deliver it to the network. In several countries, we are witnessing the emergence of consumers that are producing energy from renewable sources, known as prosumers. Earlier this year, UNDP conducted a feasibility study that suggested options on how the concept of prosumers could be taken forward also in the context of Montenegro. The framework for implementation of this concept was just approved at the beginning of June. All of this points to the fact that Montenegro is on the right path to meeting the majority of its energy needs and becoming an exporter once fully connected to the regional energy market. It also demonstrates the opportunity to achieve more ambitious national level targets through the nationally determined contributions, which is supported by UNDP's Climate Promise. Today, UNDP's Climate Promise is supporting more than 112 countries around the world to deliver on their commitments to the Paris Agreement by enhancing their targets for emissions reductions in line with national priorities. But the Climate Promise is not just about mitigation, it's about a lot more than that. COVID economic recovery is an opportunity to build back better with climate adaptation in mind as well. There is a particular opportunity for Montenegro to embrace adaptive nature-based solutions as a social and economic multiplier through its agriculture and forestry sectors. In this regard, please allow me to congratulate the government on the formulation of Montenegro's first national adaptation plan, which was supported by UNDP through funding from the Green Climate Fund. There are many examples around the world where countries are leveraging nature-based solutions for smarter, climate-sensitive land use and the creation of jobs to catalyze green, sustainable economic growth. Excellencies, dear colleagues, the Green Days 2020 conference vision is ambitious, but ambition is exactly what we need today. The path forward, as spelled out in the European Green Deal, The Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement is clear. We must rely on those frameworks to correct the system's failures and inequalities that brought us here, and to guide the policies and investments that will drive a smart recovery and deliver triple socioeconomic and environmental wins. We must be greater than the sum of our parts. So let me close by offering another quote from the teenage activist Greta Thunberg, speaking at the September 2019 UN Climate Summit. She said, "If you choose to fail us, we will never forgive you." Ladies and gentlemen, never in modern history have we been presented with such a profound opportunity, backed up by evidence, to change course. Building back better from COVID and addressing the climate crisis is not just necessary, it is our fundamental responsibility to future generations. So, please allow me to thank again our partners for co-hosting this important conference and for inviting me to share these thoughts with you. On behalf of UNDP, I wish you fruitful discussions and look forward to our continued collaboration in achieving a green, sustainable future. Thank you.
Well, we have heard from Pradeep, and I'm very much grateful for the opportunity, though he cannot be with us, as I would be very much interested in asking several questions, particularly on the financing of the process, as he's overseeing the huge budget of 5 billion of grants, financing 142 different countries and projects implemented there. Well, anyhow, I'd like to turn to Ivana Vojinovic. Ivana, well, once again, good morning. I apologize if I somehow was very much in a hurry, as I think I mentioned you are State Secretary, a General Director. You are actually. Anyhow, will you please share with us your presentation?
Okay, thank you, Goran. Thank you very much. Dear Mr. Kolasouria, dear Goran, dear Nicola, dear Herman, dear all other participants and panelists, it is my great pleasure to participate to the Green Day Conference 2020 to exchange ideas and share Montenegrin experience and plans with all of you. I would also like to express my satisfaction that this virtual conference was organized, although I am a little bit sad that we are not able to meet in person for the second time here in Podgorica, but due to that, this virtual conference at least gave us an opportunity to reduce our carbon footprint. Also, virtual conference spared many of you of not experiencing heat wave here in Podgorica, reaching 38 degrees Celsius, being maximum high over the last 15 years for June 3rd. I'll start by saying that climate change is present, and we all know that it is everyday a reality of today's civilization, affecting each and every country throughout the world. We have known that for about decades, about half a century, but people started to experience its negative and adverse effects only recently. So changing weather patterns, rising sea levels, and more extreme weather events became one of the biggest issues of our time. We can move to the next slide. On that note, I'd like to remind you that Parliament of Montenegro adopted the law on ratification of the Paris Agreement in October 2017, followed by the preparation of the socioeconomic analysis of investments needed to implement it. Montenegro has set an ambitious GHG mitigation target through its nationally determined contribution, NDC, which is 30% reduction in GHG emissions by 2030, compared to the reference year being 1990. This goal was supposed to be achieved through the development of industrial technologies, increase of the share of renewable energy sources, general improvement of energy efficiency, and modernization of energy sector. An important reduction of GHG emission beyond NDC, more precisely by 40%, was already achieved and reached in 2013, primarily by reducing activities in the industrial sector, in aluminum plants, and in the agriculture sector, which caused an increase of the relative share of energy sector in total GHG emissions without sinks to as much as 76% in that 2013 year. But planned growth of economic activity in the period 2017 until 2030 is based on priority development projects in the area of energy production related to the construction of hydropower plants, wind power plants, photovoltaic plants, etc. Then in transport, construction of highway and other projects in the area of industry, in particular metal industry, in the area of tourism, and also in the area of agriculture. With the support of UNDP, the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Tourism started a review of NDC. Among other activities, this review of NDC will include climate change mitigation measures, which is very important, and also gender equality issues. Also, the analysis of financial assessment of the planned measures will be performed because it is extremely important to mobilize all possible financial resources to be invested in the fight against negative impacts of climate change. With this revision of NDC, Montenegro will continue to fulfill its internationally undertaken obligations and give its national contribution to a reduction of negative impacts of greenhouse gases emissions in 2030 compared to the base year. We are expecting that the draft of the new NDC will be developed by mid-October this year. Next slide. Okay, I must first of all emphasize that Montenegro opened Chapter 27, Environment and Climate Change, for negotiations with the EU in December 2018, being now the only country which has negotiations in this demanding and very complex chapter. Back then, we received 8 closing benchmarks for this chapter, one of them being directly linked to the climate change, and which is written on this slide. I will cite it right now. On climate change, Montenegro continues its alignment with the acquis, especially related to the European ETS, in line with the EU ETS directive and its amendments. Also, Montenegro further aligns with relevant secondary legislation, mainly related to the MRV system, the Union Register. Montenegro makes sure that the appropriate framework is in place to implement the EU ETS in its entirety regarding MRV of greenhouse gas emissions. So everything what Montenegro is actually doing is in the function also of fulfilling this closing benchmark related to the climate change within Chapter 27. Next slide. In this context, I would also like to draw your attention to strong interconnection between climate change and air quality. Over the previous period, Montenegro has worked intensively on the very important issues related to the air quality improvement, being also one of the biggest challenges in the global environmental policy. The first one is the improvement of air quality monitoring by establishing and during time expanding state monitoring network, which now consists of 10 automatic stations on the entire territory of Montenegro. The second significant improvement is the improvement of reporting on air emissions by updating the air emissions inventory for the period 2012 until 2018 and submitting it through IONET and forwarding it to the Secretariat of the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution in March this year. Complete time series for the period 1990 until 2018 was recalculated in accordance with the new methodology, and with this fulfillment of reporting obligations towards this convention has been continued, and basic preconditions for accession of Montenegro to the Gothenburg Protocol are created. Moreover, re-establishment of reporting on air emissions presents fulfillment of a part of one of the closing benchmarks within Chapter 27 related to the air quality. And also, there is an improvement of the policy framework by development of the draft air pollution control program in accordance with the requirements of NETS directive from 2016. This draft program contains detailed cost analysis for reduction of emissions, and which will be, according to the common position for Chapter 27, represent the base for negotiations on Montenegro's obligation with regard to reduction of polluting emissions covered by NETS directive. This program will represent an integral part of the updated strategy for air quality management for period 2021 until 2024. Activities on updating strategy have begun in the last year, and we have a ambition to finalize this new strategic framework until the end of this year. Next slide. I would like also to emphasize that Montenegro established strategic and legislative framework for the implementation of climate change policy. In that regard, let me remind that back in 2015, Montenegro adopted the first national climate change strategy as a key strategic document in this area, with the duration until 2030. This strategic document provides us guidance and direction for the climate change policies and analysis of mitigation policies, measures and actions that will be implemented during this period, all with a view to reduce GHG emissions. The national strategy has a strong focus on harmonization with the EU climate change legislation framework and on mitigation measures, while it is relatively vague on adaptation to climate change. Additional climate change related policies include the National Strategy for Sustainable Development until 2030 and National Strategy for Chapter 27. When we are talking about the National Strategy for Sustainable Development, I must say that this strategy introduced for Montenegro the concept of resource efficiency and the need for a circular economy, and these concepts are considered a significant contribution to the achievement of SDG 13. Also, in December 2019, Parliament of Montenegro adopted the law on protection against negative impacts of climate change, which represents the basis for the establishment of the national system for monitoring, reporting, and verification of GHG, the operation of ETS, which will ensure a sectoral distribution of efforts to reduce emission outside the emissions trading system. Also, in last year, Montenegro started the activities on the development of the National Energy and Climate Plan, a very important piece of strategic documents which will be developed in the coming period. Our priority in the next period is also development of a low carbon development strategy with an action plan, whose preparation is one of the priority activities within ongoing IPA 3 programming. Regarding the ongoing activities and plan, I would also like to emphasize that the process of preparation of the third national communication of Montenegro on climate change under UNFCCC is in the final stage, and in this way Montenegro also continues to fulfill its international obligation under this convention. Having said all this, I would like to underline that Montenegro so far is successfully implementing all the activities that contribute to the reduction of GHG emissions, contributing to the fulfillment of obligations on both national and international level, especially in regard to the UN conventions and within EU negotiating process. Besides being part of the global response to the climate change effects, Montenegro strives to become during time climate neutral as much as possible. But this will be achieved only by implementing and enforcing relevant climate legislation in full, identifying climate risks, and by dedicating significant proportion of financing to climate actions mainstreamed into policies such as biodiversity, forestry, energy, in order to make them become climate friendly. I will conclude by referring to the IPCC report, which says that we should do everything possible to try to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius or below. The only way to do that is to stop the increase of constantly rising GHG emissions as soon as possible, and then make deep cuts to become carbon neutral by 2050. If the world doesn't act decisively and quickly to reverse this trend, we run the risk of dangerously high both economic and environmental costs. It won't be easy, but scientists say that it is possible, and that each degree matters, each year matters, and each decision matters. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ivana, thank you very much for what you have presented. Well, I'd like to ask you something. I've heard from colleagues of yours in Serbian government that something you have also mentioned, and this is that negotiating Chapter 27 is very complicated. It is also very expensive. It takes time. There is a need to really do the fundraising and invest a lot of both efforts and money into achieving certain results. So I have a tricky question for you, and this is, as you mentioned something about closing benchmarks for Chapter 27, would you dare to say something about your personal expectations when it comes to really closing the chapter? I mean, been there, done that in different areas, and I know how tricky it is to play with the dates. Would you say something? And this is the first question. I have another one. You may approach it later on. And this is, well, look, I've really enjoyed very much your presentation. You do have a framework in place. You do have regulations. It's really linking every effort with what the EU has done and what the UN has done in this respect. But eventually people are not asking about this. What people are asking for is, what about the air pollution? And you refer to air pollution. What about the forestry? What about the water? So do we really have a healthier life, if I may say? Because this would be a real closing benchmark for ordinary citizens. So these two questions: a date, or at least a wish list, if I may say so, and something about the reality. Is there an improvement following this huge engagement of the government? Please.
Okay, thank you very much for this tricky question. Okay, we all know that this Chapter 27 is among the most complex, most financially demanding chapters in a negotiating process with the European Union, and experience of all new member states definitely confirms that. Well, regarding dates, definitely I would not like to say what could be exact date of closing Chapter 27. Why? Because of the simple fact that for us it is much more important to have all standards introduced, first of all, into our legal framework, and to have them all fully implemented and enforced, especially in this area of climate change, because if we improve the resilience of our economy and of our entire country with implementing proper both mitigation and adaptation measures on time, I think that we can first of all make our economy much more competitive, much stronger to respond to possible external shocks that might emerge during time, and any kind of uncertainties such as this COVID-19 outbreak, which definitely was a kind of surprise for every one of us. So this is our approach, to make a step-by-step approach in order to have all high and very demanding EU standards put in place for the sake of Montenegrin citizens, and in parallel for the sake of fulfilling our the most important foreign policy goals, and that is full membership of Montenegro into European Union. I must confess that since Montenegro opened Chapter 27, as I've said back in December 2018, we were very successful in responding to all requirements that were set by our partners and colleagues from relevant DGs in European Commission. And I am very proud that a working group for Chapter 27 established very good, very strong partnership with our colleagues from the European Commission during the negotiations that we have. I think, which is the most important, that we build a strong confidence among each other, and Montenegro receives strong support. And I would like to take this opportunity also to thank to all our European Union colleagues, both from delegation of European Union here in Podgorica and also our colleagues from Brussels. We also know that now European Union is facing also huge challenges related to the implementation of European Green Deal. Only recently, European Commission presented its new European Union biodiversity strategy, which includes all relevant sectorial policies, also relates to the climate change issues. So these are new pieces of legislation, new pieces of strategic framework that that are kind of challenge for full implementation, even for EU member states, and not to mention candidate countries such as Montenegro. So, and I'll conclude by saying that we will continue to try to catch up with all developments on European Union level, to try to implement them as much as possible until the end of this year. The government of Montenegro is going to adopt a strategic action plan for fulfillment of closing benchmarks in Chapter 27, very ambitious strategic framework, and this will be a kind of a roadmap for Montenegro until the negotiations with European Union will be concluded. So for us, it is the most important that we have a clear action plan, that we have a clear picture in our heads what we must do, when, with what amount of financing. And I think if we continue in a way we started with negotiations in Chapter 27, this story with Chapter 27 will be a success for Montenegro and for European Union as well.
Thank you very much, Ivana. What I've heard from you is substance versus the dates. Thanks a lot. Nicola, we are turning to you, and well, I'm very much interested in what you are going to present, particularly having in mind your knowledge regarding this nexus environment/energy. And besides, you've been also the Director General, you've been also in the board of the management board of the birth of electric energy. Therefore, we intend to hear from you also what is happening there and what the Montenegro is going to do in this respect. So please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, good morning to everyone. It is my great pleasure to be part of this conference and to listen all those interesting presentations and thoughts from experts in the field. We can start with first slide. This presentation giving a brief or just bullet points of most important things that we've done in past period and presentation of our plans for the future. As we heard from previous speakers today, the importance of climate change is taking one of the leading position when it comes to discuss about future. And I'm sure that in the case with signing countries of Paris Agreement. Saying that, I'm glad to express my satisfaction that this is the case also with Montenegro. So we are aware that it is impossible to plan responsible development of energy sector without climate awareness. And we see that as a good potential and good opportunity for further economic development. We share this moment of history with climate change deniers, COVID-19 deniers, and generally deniers of different scientific facts. That makes our mission even more important. The next slide. We proved our commitment as a country to a green transition, to already started energy transition, and concrete result in creating a national mechanism of CO2 trading scheme. We have set up a mechanism which is going to provide results in a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, adequate signals for existing and potential investors, so they know what they can expect here. And by this, we created a predictable framework for investment in the country, but also further harmonization with EU regulation framework. On the next slide, you can see the brief presentation of our CO2 trading scheme or cap and trade system. Total amount of greenhouse gases can be emitted by installation covered by the system with gradually fall. Within the cap, companies receive or buy emission allowances, which they can trade with one another as needed. Free allocation of CO2 emission will also gradually fall. Carbon leakage is recognized in the mechanism. It is in accordance with EU principles, and auctions set as default method for allocation allowance. A surplus of emissions allowance creates the market stability reserve. The important thing is that maybe one of the most important things from this scheme or mechanism is the fact that funds raised from emission credit can be used for environmental protection and improvement, incentives for construction of new renewable energy sources, and incentives for innovation in accordance with the smart specialization strategy for Montenegro. I'm sure that yesterday you had the opportunity to hear about this from Her Excellency's Minister Damjanovic, and we see this smart specialization strategy as a good opportunity for the development also. Next slide, you will see the brief information about projects ongoing or planned. I already mentioned the started energy transition. One of the first steps in that process is an ecological reconstruction of the only TPP in the country, in the municipality of Kevlja. Contracts is signed a few weeks ago, and we expect that all job will be done in next 36-39 months. Beside that, we signed the contract for building one of the biggest solar power plant in Europe, capacity of 250 megawatts in Briska Gora. Today, we are in final phase of negotiation for new wind farm in Braici with installed capacity of 100 megawatts. And we are beginning phase of preparation. New tender for solar power plant in Podgorica is ongoing, and we expect that we will have contract until the end of the year. But we already did a lot. Only during this government term, we have increased our annual production of electricity for about 15%, and all from renewables. Commercial losses in distribution are almost eliminated. Energy efficiency in public buildings has already made most of our schools and healthcare institutions a better place to be and to work. Now, we have to make some new decisive steps toward sustainable energy future as one of the cornerstone of our green economy. And one of the most important projects has started, the project of HPP Komarnica. Mr. Svilanovic made an interesting question about that project, and I will answer on that because that question was interesting for a lot of people from Montenegro, but also from outside the country. The importance of this project is not only the story of using hydro potential, but more than this, project is important as a precondition for development of renewables only power system, providing all necessary stability and security. The great news are the facts that through the process of public consultation, there were no any objection on environmental impact. With new open-minded approach that took in consideration all public state concerns, like negative effects on Canyon Video and city of Shamnik. Today we have a great example of a winning Green Deal. Also very important is the fact that project of HPP Komarnica is on list of the greenfield projects which do not face serious bottlenecks in regional strategy for sustainable hydropower development financed by VBIF. And even I mentioned some great results that we made in the sense of creating all necessary preconditions or regulatory framework. And I will mention just that that are in the process the changing on energy law, which are going to provide our strong position that we will go into creating new national energy and climate plan. Also, the prosumer story is presented on the very incentive way and giving a strong signal to the customers in the country, to the households or to the business sector that they can produce electricity and spend their own. And I think that that law is already adopted by the government and it is parliament procedure, and I hope that it will be soon finished. Our development vision, as well as our practical deeds, together with already achieved results in energy and climate sector, make us determined to keep the regional leading position when it comes to the energy and environmental and pave our EU way. That's all for my presentation, but would like to use the opportunity to answer on the question that Mr. Svilanovic made in the beginning of this presentation. Okay, when we speak about HPP Komarnica, yes, you will enjoy the exploration of all white beauty in Montenegro in the future. So HPP Komarnica will not affect Canyon Video, will not affect city of Shamnik, and those information are very important for all, if I can say, serious investors and financial institutions. So we are aware that preconditions, that framework for developing these kind of projects is a little bit different than it was 20, 30 or 50 years ago. When we speak about your second question, it was about electricity exchange. Actually, I'm not in the board. I was there. Okay. Today I'm in board PCG, but I know what's going on in process of establishing organized electricity market in Montenegro. So negotiations are in process with Nord Pool. So we will see how it end up. I think in the next few months we will have concrete results from that. So we expect that soon we will have all preconditions for beginning of the ahead market in the country. But one of the most important reasons why we would like to have it is, of course, to finish the process of market coupling with all interconnections that we have, especially the great opportunity for Montenegrin market is under sea level cable with Italy and the opportunity to make market coupling with them. Of course, with our neighborhoods, the future will be market coupling, and I think in that regard that we will have coupled market in the region and good signals, or only good signals that we can have for investors when they make decisions for investing in the country. So they will have an exact signal from the market about electricity prices. That's it for now.
Well, thank you very much, Nicola. You were very kind, and thank you for answering my question. I am eager to learn about Komarnica. I intend with my family to do the Tara River rafting this year, as I was doing this like in the last 18 years, almost every year. And in the last several years, I was enjoying very much canyoning in the canyon of the river Komernica, Nevidio. And it's a real pearl, a jewel in Montenegro tourism. I highly appreciate it, and I'm inviting everybody to enjoy as well. And I'm happy that you've just said that it will be possible also, even if this power plant is built there. Well, I will reward your kindness to answer the tricky questions by, of course, asking more questions. Well, as you mentioned, that one of the targets set for GHG emission is, if you have a cutoff date, 2005, to go by 2030 to minus 43%. Could you elaborate briefly where you are today? What do you think? What happened in the meantime, thanks to the measures undertaken by the government? And the second one, you may answer it now or we may leave it for later on, would be regarding this energy mix you presented here, that you're open for investments when it comes to wind, solar, and hydro. What about biomass? There was a discussion regarding Plevda, perhaps, and a possibility of going for a biomass power plant there or not. So this would be a set of questions for you. You may start now, or if you want to leave it for later, I'm also happy.
I'm okay now, but you decide.
Okay, please go.
Okay, thank you. When we speak about GHG emissions and situation in the country, unfortunately, I think in most of ex-Yugoslavia country or countries from this part of Europe, thanks to the process of transition, a lot of industry lost their markets and a lot of factories is closed. So the amount of emission that we had in the beginning, and there's a base year in 1990, is now today drastically lower. But it cannot be the only answer on our way to respond to the goals that we signed in the Paris Agreement. So what was the idea of our CO2 trading scheme? Okay, we have situation in the country lives today. We are fully aware that if we would like to be part of EU, we have to be part of EU trading scheme. You cannot be part of that process just, if I can say, by night, just taking, the part of this once you sign the contract with EU, but you have to be prepared. And we thought that it is the best option for now to create CO2 scheme on national level, to give opportunity to existing companies in the country to adopt their business to the one day when we become EU part, adopt business to EU trading scheme, but also giving a strong signal to all potential investors what they can expect here. So we said, okay, this will be some kind of transition period of CO2 trading scheme. But once when we became a part of EU trading scheme, all our emissions will be part of one bigger picture, and we expect that to be after 2025. The reason why we took this year is the process of negotiations with EU is ongoing, and we expect that till that day we will close our chapters and be part of a full member of EU. And that's the reason why we set up with our bylaw documentation that kind of transition process, which gradually decreasing free emissions, with also giving signals to existing and new investors what they can expect, what will be in the future, because we thought that it is really important to make good regulatory and the legal framework, but also the make the one that will be predictable. So all investors can now see what they can expect in the future. So that was the intuition behind setting up CO2 emission and our commitment to cut out the GHG emissions. Also, I mentioned that we did a lot in the sense of creating new protection facilities that are used renewables. So we see that as a good opportunity, not just for GHG emission, but also for general economical development. And also the very important projects are projects from energy efficiency. So all this setup, I think all these projects will bring added value, will bring something new and some new quality to the process of cutting GHG emissions. When we speak about energy mix and potential biomass projects in the country, of course that we are open for them. We will be happy one day when we going to have a new plant that will use biomass, because we think that there is, especially in the north of the country, there is, and you mentioned Pljevlja, there is a lot of potential for this kind of projects. I'm sure that you're familiar with new upgraded concept of attracting investors for renewables in the country. A few years ago, we stopped with new tendering process for small HPPs, for new wind farms, for solar power plants that use feed-in tariffs as incentive mechanism. So we decided to go just on the market basis, and we thought that in the future, in the past, I think past 10 years, 10 or 15 years, we did a lot in the sense of creating a good framework in the energy sector, but also we did a lot in the sense of creating new transmission system lines that is maybe the second most important thing to attract new investors for production facilities. I'm mentioning this because when you have this in mind, so good regulatory and predictable regulatory legal framework, you have a good infrastructure, basic infrastructure in the country, you can attract investors to build new solar power plant, new wind power plant, or HPPs on market basis. So we did that in a few years ago. I mentioned the project in Briska Gora and in the Brajići, but also a new wind farm was. So the same situation is for biomass. So we are open for this kind of investment. We are ready to adopt any kind of suggestion or to hear any ideas from business side how we can improve our system of attracting investors in this sector. So we will see in the future. We hope that great potential in municipality of Pljevlja and the north of the country can be used also for new power plants that use biomass.
Nicola, thank you very much. Let us now turn to Herman Spitz from the EU delegation in Podgorica. Look, Herman, I'm not going to ask you, though everyone is keen to learn, all citizens of Montenegro as well as citizens of Serbia, what is going to happen with this decision, which is due today, hopefully, of the ministers of the EU member states regarding the free travel into the EU. I'm not asking this. I'm just saying to what extent our relationship with the EU is of crucial importance for everyday's life. Well, I'd like to give you a floor and to invite you to present what does it mean, the Green Deal for Europe, and what is the niche for our countries there, including in particular Montenegro. The floor is yours, Herman, please.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everybody, colleagues from the panel, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, all those who have an interest in protecting the planet. We all depend on it. I mean, as you all know, the planet is under great pressure. It needs protection. Environmental degradation is taking place. This is at alarming levels. It affects the health of the planet, the health of the species, and of course, our health. So just to give you a few bullets to explain why this pressure is further growing. The world's population, next slide, please. The world's population is projected to grow by almost 1/3 to 10 billion in 2050. And more people are joining the middle class every year with more income, with more consumption power, with more use of resources. And by 2050, almost 70% of the world population will be living in cities, thus putting and focusing the pressure on the geographically limited areas. And to our very much dismay, when we now go in summer down to the beach, we have to see that 85% of the litter items on the European beaches is plastic, and half of which originates from single-use plastic, mainly bottles, only used for a short time. And sadly, we are witnessing the 6th mass extinction of biodiversity. And even more sadly, we are the driver of it. So all this to say that without resolve, without urgent action at national and global level, large parts of the world, such as Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, Latin America, will see many people on the move by 2050. So next slide, please. So the question is, what can be done, what should be done against this background, against these challenges, and what is the EU ready to do, and what role does the European Union want to play? Europe has developed a vision for the next 5 years and beyond. Next, please. Next slide, please. And this vision, that is the Green Deal. We have heard referred to a couple of times already in this panel. The European Green Deal, it's about transforming the EU's economy for a sustainable future. And this will be done by key action in critical areas that's spelled out in the various green boxes. I won't read all of them, but this is action such as promoting the supply of clean, affordable and secure energy, mobilizing the industry for a clean and circular economy, preserving and restoring ecosystems and biodiversity, and the initiative Farm to Fork, that starts with the very often and very much criticized common agricultural policy, and wants to build a food chain which is healthy and environmental friendly all the way from production to the consumer. And what is, sorry, could you go back in the deal, in the slide? And what is important is that this European Green Deal, that is linked to the that's linked to the Agenda 2030. You see that underneath the circle in the middle, where it says, where it picks up the motto of the Agenda 2030, leave no one behind. Yes, next slide now, please. So this very much makes reference and establishes the link to the big undertaking, which is the Agenda 2030 with the SDGs, the 70 SDGs. We see here the icons, which we all know, although we may not be able to produce them ahead. But this is what is now, let's say, a holistic view of what needs to be done and what we are striving for. And the EU is very much attached to that. Agenda 2030 is close to EU's heart. The European Union was closely involved in shaping it, and the EU also wants to be a champion in implementing it. Next slide, please. Yes, again, let us just get back to the Green Deal and talk about the ambitions. The Green Deal wants to transform the EU economy and make it sustainable. But it also, at the same time, the Green Deal wants to be a growth strategy, the EU's new growth strategy. It wants to create jobs, it wants to increase competitiveness, and it wants to boost innovation. And it wants to achieve this by decoupling from resource use and pollution. So the ambition is, the big ambition, which also has been cited already, that by 2050, there are no net emissions of greenhouse gases anymore. And to get there, actions will have to be streamlined across all policies of the EU, including in the external action. Next slide, please. Yes, and this external action, that's laid down also in the Green Deal. The Green Deal, its narrative has been written down in the Green Deal communication, which has an external chapter. And this external chapter sets out very much the EU's global ambition for leadership in tackling climate change and environmental challenges. The EU wants to be a credible example in implementing the action. The EU wants to actively advocate in bilateral and multilateral settings green action, and the EU will also support financially green action in poorer countries. And to achieve all this, you have it on the slide, the EU will work with Africa, the EU will engage with the G20 countries, which incidentally are responsible for 80% of global greenhouse gas emissions. EU will also establish partnerships with our neighboring countries in the eastern and the southern neighborhood, and it will build alliances with countries and regions such as Latin America, Caribbean, Asia Pacific, and very importantly, and this is also following the Poznan summit, the EU will set up a green agenda for the Western Balkans. And this green agenda has the ambition to mirror the Green Deal. Next slide, please. So we are talking now about EU candidate countries, those which are very close to the EU. They are surrounded by EU. Many Western Balkan countries have borders with EU member states. And this is a good basis for integration. We do have a good framework. We have an enlargement policy which sets out the common interest. We have the process of EU accession negotiations, where we address reform discussion and what needs to be done. And then perhaps on the more technical level, we are speaking about the alignment of the EU acquis, because that's a huge body of rules and regulations, and it's sliced up in chapters, and we have already heard from Ivana, chapter 27, that's a very comprehensive, ambitious, but also an expensive one to align to. But the EU is not only demanding action from the partner countries, the EU is also coming with aid, with technical and financial aid. And the main instrument to implement those reforms, this is the instrument for pre-accession. We are currently in the second funding cycle, IPA 2. But now programming of the next one has started, which is IPA 3. Next slide, please. So we want to come to a green agenda, from the Green Deal to a green agenda for the partner countries in the Western Balkans. Of course, the need for environment action is not new. It's already acknowledged by the 2019 enlargement package. As I mentioned, it's very much set out in the Poznan conclusions. Of course, as we have heard, COVID came as a shock. It cannot, all these nice plans now seem to be endangered, cannot be just implemented as we thought we could do. There is this economic impact by the crisis, by the pandemic, which has to be countered with financial support, and also the EU has to play its role here. But it should not now serve as an excuse to go back in the old thinking. We still have to see it as a chance and pick it up and prioritize green recovery. The green agenda, that is not yet on paper. I mean, there's a lot of thinking going on. A lot of has been written, but nothing has been come out so far, because the plan is to make the green agenda part of an economic and investment plan for the Western Balkans, which will come out later this year. There's a consultation process currently going on. And once that has been concluded, it will then be published. So we want to see that the Green Deal for the EU, which is reflected in the Green Agenda for the Western Balkan countries, and it will also have the ambition to become a vector for growth. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. So what will the Green Agenda look at? I mean, very much also what the Green Deal will be looking at. Decarbonization. The region has a high potential for clean energy. We have also heard that before. That should be tapped into. Circular economy, there's much to be done, but it has to be tackled and it has to be promoted. Depollution of air has to take place. Water and soil monitoring prevention would help in this. Of course, the food chain should also become healthy, environmental friendly. Agriculture should become modern, and food quality should be as high as we would find it in the EU. And then, of course, there's the natural capital, which also here in this beautiful country is an enormous asset, and that has to be protected. And in Montenegro, I think it's more about protection than restoration, because we have so much. This country has so much, and sometimes there's perhaps the temptation that you do not look so closely when you use these assets for, let's say, profit purposes. But it's taking capital from the future generations, and it has to be very much become a, let's say, a reflex that this natural capital is protected, because it's also the basis for tourism in this country. I think I will stop here and ready to take some questions. Thank you.
Herman, thank you very much for your presentation. Actually, I'd like to keep your attention for a moment on the last, what you have displayed, and this is this green agenda for the Western Balkans. I love it. What I was impressed with also while listening to Ivana and Nicola is this, that you are really insisting on this link. This is not only about decarbonization. This is not only about limiting GHG emission. This is not only about air, it's also very much about economic development. And you've also touched upon also in your slides that the Green Deal for Europe is actually how to boost the economic development through the investment in renewables. So to link the economic development with the climate change mitigation. Therefore, I would actually like to ask you something which is in a way related. And this is that what are possible financial mechanisms for Montenegro? What is, are there any incentives, funds? By the way, we have also received a list of questions actually by the audience, including by one of the companies from Hungary, which is interested in installing and selling solar panels. And this is exactly what they're asking. They are simply saying that, well, they contact the clients. What they learn is that the clients are not aware with their possibilities to get a loan. So they're also asking similar question about financial incentives, which might be used to support this turn towards renewables for Montenegro. So on a general level as well as on a client level. Could you say a word on this? Yes. And I'm also inviting, by the way, co-panelists to share here.
Thank you. Thank you, Goran. Of course, I mean, when you see this sunshine out there, which is hovering above us for a large part of the year, so the natural reflexes can that sun energy not be harassed and put into the grid or put into our house's power system, so that we could get sun for free. I mean, the EU has done a few things. Just to show some pilot projects, there was the street lighting in Cetinje, which is with solar energy. That was EU funded. Of course, there are many things which can be done, but to be clear, our partner is in the first place the government, because we want to help the government to put into action its green plans or its development plans on a larger scale when it comes to reforms, when it comes to living up to the expectations under the EU acquis. So, as I mentioned before, there is the IPA instrument. There's a national instrument that's complemented by a regional instrument. I mean, for the second funding cycle, IPA 2, we have allocated something close to 270 million euro. That's topped up with money from the regional one. Most of it is money which goes through government channels. We are looking at the key sectors. We are looking at the rule of law, competitiveness. We're looking at education, agriculture, environment, and transport. And now when we look specifically at environment, I think during this period that just citing, something like 34 million have been allocated to environment. This is money which is used partly to support the technical assistance, so that people come and help government institutions to develop legislation, which is then making that link to or implementing, implementing EU acquis. But then there's also investment in wastewater, in railway systems, in drinking water. So it's a combination of technical assistance and a few hardware goodies. We also have some support to the civil society via calls through the national, through the non-government organizations. So for what is then the future and bringing the Green Deal to action, there will be a new envelope available. This is currently discussed in Brussels. I mean, it's all now a little bit taken up by big uncertainty about the multi-annual budgetary framework that has not been sorted out in Brussels. I mean, it's had a slow start because also of Brexit, so the burden has to be distributed on other members, but then COVID came on top of it, and that of course made it a huge task. But once this is clarified, we will then know how much the Western Balkan countries and Turkey, which is also in that, could count on. The Commission proposal was 14.5 billion for the 7 years to come. But that has, of course, to be now confirmed by the member states, by the budgetary authorities. And then we have under the framework, the conceptual framework for the next funding cycle, IPA 3, we have 5 windows, and window 3 is connectivity and green agenda. And this will get a lot of prominence, and we will be under pressure to make sure that there is sufficient funds going towards this ambitious window, because it is the link also to the EU's Green Deal. And if we are talking about integrating Western Balkans as future member states, then this preparation has to start as early as possible, because it's a long way, it's a big job, and we have to support our partner countries early on in making that transition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman, for your answer. You referred at the funds available on the side of the EU instrument for pre-accession mainly, but I'd like now to turn to Nicola and invite him perhaps to consider this question regarding potential incentives which are coming also by the government of Montenegro. Nicola, please.
Yeah, I already mentioned that we cannot provide direct financial support through the feed-in mechanism or something like that. But I mentioned also that we created a very incentive and good framework for developing prosumers. Even that prosumers are recognized in the existing energy law, but we were not satisfied with the amount of projects that are finished in the country, because it's just a few of them there. So we decided to create new mechanism, new concept that will provide good opportunity for everyone to install their own production capacities. So what's the general idea? For the beginning, I think in next few months, we will start with, like I said, pilot project for prosumers, which is going to be very similar to those very successful projects from energy efficiency. What is about? It is the general setup or the concept of the project is that government, from one side, take the obligation to pay interest for the loans for households who decide to install prosumers in this case. On the other side, we make some public call for every banks in the country that are interested in financing these kind of projects. So when we get few of those with the lowest interest rate, we have the pool of banks on one side. On the other side, I mentioned that you have government, and third side in the project are construction companies or companies who will physically install panels and systems on households. Also, we came to those companies by some tendering process, some transparent and competitive process. So that will be the third pool for the project. So on one side you have a government who's going to pay interest rate for your loan. On the other side you have some few banks that you can choose which one you will take the loan. And on the third side you have the company who is if I can say EPC contractor or company who will build the plant on your home. Also, you can choose from few of them that we make a deal. So what's the idea? The idea is to go through the project with strong signals to all households and all business side that they can use the opportunity of prosumers. That prosumers make as a good chance for reducing electricity bills to produce their own electricity. And I think that prosumers are something that is going to have a strong impact in the electricity market in the country, and that will show us the real benefits of renewables. Because it's not always easy to explain all benefits of renewables, of energy transition to the citizens, to the people, when you speak to them with your obligation for Paris Agreement or negotiation process with EU. But it is much easier to explain to them and to show them some concrete results, like prosumers make this opportunity. So once again, we will soon start with the process with pilot project for prosumers. For now, we have in budget 200,000 euros for financing the interest rates. So we think that with that amount we can make some significant amount of credit. On the other side, for companies, for households to install prosumers, to install solar photovoltaic, and to install the rest of energy efficiency measures. I think that in next year when COVID situation will be much better, I hope the space in budget will be much more than this, so we can continue with this kind of project, so that we can see the good results in near future. In some our analysis, it shows up that by installing photovoltaic on your rooftop for households in the Montenegro, you can pay off your investment in period of 6 to 8 years. If you have in mind that your installation can be live for 25 years, you can see the real benefits. So once again, soon we start with that pilot project as a great opportunity to come to the households, to come to the citizens, and to explain the potential of prosumers. I hope that will show also the opportunity for the banks and financial institutions to support these kind of projects even without government in the process. So directly on business side, on just commercial deals with households to finance these kind of projects.
I'll keep your attention for a moment on these investment-related questions and financial incentives-related questions. First of all, I'd like to invite everyone who is following this conversation to also check the chat. As in the chat, we have also received an email address of one potential investor who is interested, and we have also received an answer that there are financial institutions interested in considering potential investments in the green energy. Well, from what I have learned so far, I'm aware that there was a very high-level conversation between the EU, the European Commission, and financial institutions like EBRD, EIB, and KfW. And I'm aware that there is one instrument at least, which is called ELENA, which might be approached both in EBRD and EIB, which might provide at least startup funding for certain incentives. We have also received in a chat an information that EBRD representative here, I know, as I've said, that EIB and KfW are also using a lot of funds in supporting green energy. So please consider approaching them. Now I'd like to come back to these issues related to development and environment, and would like to invite perhaps you, Ivana, to join us. As the revision of NDC, and you mentioned in your presentation how far you went in preparing the NDC, will be finalized till the end of the year, and since it will be in a way development path for Montenegro. In which direction do you think Montenegro should put its development efforts in the future? And I guess you will be cited and supported by Nicola in answering this question. Ivana, please. Muted.
Okay, sorry. You are guessing right. Revision of our NDC will fully align with all our efforts of decarbonization of our economy, with all our efforts to reduce the increase of GHG emissions, with all our efforts to make our forestry, energy, and all other sectors more carbon neutral. As I've said, also a revision of our NDC will also encompass all adaptation measures which were lacking in the current NDC, and we saw that it is equally important to have both mitigation and adaptation measures. Having said that, it is important to emphasize that in addition to all governmental efforts, our private sector must go in parallel with their activities in terms of improving their techniques and technologies, especially in energy and industry sector, in order to make Montenegro to fulfill the new revised NDC, because without their efforts and their support, definitely we will fail to fulfill it until 2030. For that, I think the most important is financing. Financing, which you just discussed with both Herman and Nicola. So the financing both in energy and environmental sectors will be of crucial importance for fulfillment of all our strategic goals that Montenegro is setting on both national and international level. We know that in environmental sector we cannot fulfill our needs from the sources such as state budget or budgets of local governments due to their very limited fiscal capacities for huge infrastructure investments. Although there has been an increase in the capital budget financing over the last couple of years, we must rely upon other sources of financing. Herman has just explained how Montenegro is using IPA instrument in financing own needs. Although we have support in technical assistance, we will be more and more asking for concrete infrastructure investments in the area of wastewater treatment, waste management, removing pollution and so on. For us are very much important financing from external sources that you just mentioned, such as EBRD, EIB, BIF, and all our other similar sources of financing. And I would like to take this opportunity just to inform that for some of you who are not knowledgeable about that only recently government of Montenegro established a new company, EcoFund, Fund for Environmental Protection, whose business is fully based on the principle of polluter pays. And it's the main role of that institution will be to withdraw the funds from the so-called polluters here in Montenegro and to invest them only and exclusively into projects and programs in the area of environment and energy efficiency as well. So we also see this EcoFund not only as a good subject for transferring financing for environmental projects, but also to leverage additional financing from external financing sources. As I've said, all our efforts, all our activities in order to reach our all strategic goals, including revised and much more ambitious NDC that Montenegro is going to set in front of the global community, will heavily depend on, first of all, proper financing, and secondly, on good collaboration and connection between government and private sector, which has a very important role in all our plans.
Nicola, anything you'd like to add regarding this question?
Just briefly saying that I cannot add anything about NDC that Ivan mentioned, but I can say that we planning our future in the energy sector in accordance with Green Deal, of course, and as I mentioned, started energy transition. It will be defined also a new energy policy that should start soon. So in that document, we will have a strong signals for further development of the sector with, wide framework for with direction for the development. I'm saying that because after that, the very important, one of the most important documents in energy sector will be National Energy Climate Plan as a strategic document for development for next 10 years. Of course, that we are aware that not the end of the job, it's not the end of the process, and that we will have to continue with new ideas, new views, new schemes, new mechanisms for developing the sector, also in accordance with EU acquis, but with new policy of UN and new policy of EU and energy community, but also with strong signals from business side to see where is the best potential for achieving those goals.
Thank you very much, Nicola. As we have only a few minutes before closing this panel, I'd like to turn to you, Herman, and ask you a question which was raised by our audience. And this is the last one, and the others are invited to join, but please, 1 minute answer. Where do you see obstacles for Montenegro and for the Balkans as well, if you broaden this answer, to link their engagement with the Green Deal of Europe, to develop a green action? Would you say a word on the obstacles, Herman, please?
Thank you. Yes, quickly. I mean, it's a big job, and it's not only for Montenegro and the Western Balkan countries, it's also for the EU itself, because we have already heard in the aftermath of COVID, let's take a break and go back to where we were before we can build the green agenda. We don't want to do that, and we don't want to see that also here in the Western Balkans. There are, of course, challenges. One is political will, that this has to be done. This is going to be a priority. Montenegro says it's an ecological state. It has already done much in the area, so we would expect that political will prevail. But of course, there's also the problem of, or the challenge of capacity in planning and projecting. It's a small country, it's a small administration, and it's a lot to be done, but it can be done. And then thirdly, it's about money, because EU will help, but much money has to come from own resources or from loans. A country can take from EIB, from EBRD, or from other international financing institutions. But this, of course, prevents that the trees will grow into the sky very quickly. But it should not encourage us to start implementation and follow the plan. Thanks.
Well, Herman, thank you very much. I missed your first point. The second one was capacity. The third one was about the financing, not only the other financing, but also engagement on the side of the government. What was your first point?
The first point was about political will and the prioritization.
Political will. Okay. Yeah. So let me give a room to those representing the government to perhaps touch upon any of these three briefly as we are closing the panel. Please, Ivana, the floor is yours. Political will. From what I've heard from you, it is there.
It is there. It is there. As far as environmental protection is concerned, I'm very happy to say that over the years, protection of the environment has been climbing on the governmental agenda regarding the level of prioritization that government is giving to this specific policy. And I think that with opening of chapter 27, definitely environmental policy started to gain the level of attention and priority that it definitely deserves, not only in Montenegro, but I think everywhere on the global level. So a political will is put into place. I fully agree with Herman regarding capacities. We are small countries, so we must try to take the best of the people that are working in governmental institutions in order to have specific material results in our European agenda, and financing is on top of all our challenges. It must be wise to use all financing in the best possible way, not to first of all significantly increase the level of our public debt, but on the other hand to fulfill our infrastructural needs in this area on time.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you all, guys. I'd like to express my gratitude to the government of Montenegro, Chamber of Commerce, and the UNDP for bringing us all together. Would like to end the way already defined by Herman. So it is political will. So first of all, I'd like to say it is possible to really fulfill the promises given, also on behalf of the government of Montenegro. One, what we need is political will. Second, it is capacity to constantly increase. Third, to really go for financing and supporting attitude shared by IFIs as well as the government. I would like to add on my side the last sentence. The fourth, I think, is constant engagement between the government and the civic sector. There is a need to constantly work with each other so that we understand what is to be done, what the government is doing, and to what extent this is supporting our genuine wish to mitigate climate change and continue keeping the country as ecological state with all of these beauties at the seaside as well as in the mountains. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Svilanovic, and all the panelists for such an interesting and informative session. And thank you all of you for joining and for sharing actionable advice that can be useful to anyone listening. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to invite you to take a 15-minute break, during which on the live stream we will see the most interesting moments from today's first panel. I will see you all in 15 minutes for the second panel discussion, when we'll be discussing the future of tourism. Thank you, everyone.
Development goals and the Paris Climate Change Agreement give us the targets we need to steer a course towards a just, equitable, and prosperous human development, one that is in sync and positively leverages our planet's rich and diverse natural capital. Most notably, the European Union, through the Green Deal, is using the crisis as an opportunity to deliver transformational change that is guided by the science of the Paris Agreement and puts in place the building blocks for sustainable development, green recovery, and development. In 2018, 77% of Montenegro's energy consumption was from renewables. In this regard, Montenegro's investments into renewables may serve as a springboard for achieving carbon neutrality in years to come, thus being ahead of the countries which have been delaying necessary reforms in this area. There is an opportunity, a particular opportunity for Montenegro to embrace adaptive nature-based solutions as a social and economic multiplier through its agriculture and forestry sectors. The Green Days 2020 conference vision is ambitious, but ambition is exactly what we need today. The path forward, as spelled out in the European Green Deal, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Paris Agreement is clear. We must rely on those frameworks to correct the system's failures and inequalities that brought us here, and to guide the policies and investments that will drive a smart recovery and deliver triple socioeconomic and environmental wins. Building back better from COVID and addressing the climate crisis is not just necessary, it is our fundamental responsibility to future generations.
With the support of UNDP, the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Tourism started a review of NDC. Among other activities, this review of NDC will include climate change mitigation measures, which is very important, and also gender equality issue negotiations on Montenegro's obligation with regard to reduction of polluting emissions covered by NETS directive. This program will represent an integral part of the updated strategy for air quality management for period 2021 until 2024. Activities on updating strategy have begun in the last year, and we have a ambition to finalize this new strategic framework until the end of this year.
It is impossible to plan responsible development of energy sector without climate awareness. And we see that as a good potential and good opportunity for further economic development. Our development vision, as well as our practical deeds, together with already achieved results in energy and climate sector, make us determined to keep the regional leading position when it comes to the energy and environment and pave our EU way. Okay, when we speak about HPP Komarnica, yes, you will enjoy the exploration of all white beauty in Montenegro in the future. So HPP Komarnica will not affect Canyon Video, will not affect the city of Šanik, and those information are very important for all, if I can say, serious investors and financial.
It's also following the Poznan summit. The EU will set up a green agenda for the Western Balkans, and this green agenda has the ambition to mirror the Green Deal. So we want to see that the Green Deal for the EU, which is reflected in the green agenda for the Western Balkan countries, and it will also have the ambition to become a vector for growth.
Only about decarbonization. This is not only about limiting GHG emission. This is not only about air, it's also very much about economic development. And you've also touched upon also in your slides that the Green Deal for Europe is actually how to boost the economic development through the investment in renewables. So to link the economic development with the climate change mitigation.
There will be a new envelope available. This is currently discussed in Brussels. I mean, we will then know how much the Western Balkan countries and Turkey, which is also in that, could count on. The Commission proposal was 14.5 billion for the 7 years to come.
Goals in the Paris Climate Change Agreement give us the targets we need to steer a course towards a just, equitable, and prosperous human development, one that is in sync and positively leverages our planet's rich and diverse natural capital. Most notably, the European Union, through the Green Deal, is using the crisis as an opportunity to deliver transformational change that is guided by the science of the Paris Agreement and puts in place the building blocks for sustainable development, green recovery, and development. In 2018, 77% of Montenegro's energy consumption was from renewables. In this regard, Montenegro's investments into renewables may serve as a springboard for achieving carbon neutrality in years to come, thus being ahead of the countries which have been delaying necessary reforms in this area. There is an opportunity, a particular opportunity for Montenegro to embrace adaptive nature-based solutions as a social and economic multiplier through its agriculture and forestry sectors. The Green Days 2020 conference vision is ambitious, but ambition is exactly what we need today. The path forward, as spelled out in the European Green Deal, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Paris Agreement is clear. We must rely on those frameworks to correct the system's failures and inequalities that brought us here, and to guide the policies and investments that will drive a smart recovery and deliver triple socioeconomic and environmental wins. Building back better from COVID and addressing the climate crisis is not just necessary, it is our fundamental responsibility to future generations.
With the support of UNDP, the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Tourism started a review of NDC. Among other activities, this review of NDC will include climate change mitigation measures, which is very important, and also gender equality issues, negotiations on Montenegro's obligation with regard to reduction of polluting emissions covered by NETS Directive. This program will represent an integral part of the updated strategy for air quality management for period 2021 until 2024. activities on updating strategy have begun in the last year, and we have a ambition to finalize this new strategic framework until the end of this year.
It is impossible to plan responsible development of energy sector without climate awareness. And we see that as a good potential and good opportunity for further economic development. Our development vision, as well as our practical deeds, together with already achieved results in energy and climate sector, make us determined to keep the regional leading position when it comes to the energy and environment and pave our EU way. Okay, when we speak about HPP Komarnica, yes, you will enjoy the exploration of all white beauty in Montenegro in the future. So HPP Komarnica will not affect Canyon video, will not affect the city of Šanik, and those information are very important for all, if I can say, serious investors and financial.
It's also following the Poznan summit. The EU will set up a green agenda for the Western Balkans. And this green agenda has the ambition to mirror the Green Deal. So we want to see that the Green Deal for the EU, which is reflected in the green agenda for the Western Balkan countries, and it will also have the ambition to become a vector for growth.
Only about decarbonization. This is not only about limiting GHG emission. This is not only about air, it's also very much about economic development. And you've also touched upon also in your slides that the Green Deal for Europe is actually how to boost the economic development through the investment in renewables. So to link the economic development with the climate change mitigation.
There will be a new envelope available.
Welcome back for the second panel discussion of the Green Days 2020. We encourage all attendees who have already registered to get involved. So please type your questions into the chat box and our panelists will answer during the Q&A session. The official hashtag for the conference is Green Days 2020, and we invite you all to engage and share. No matter where you are in the world, our hospitality industry has been severely impacted by the outbreak of COVID-19, and tourism has been the worst affected of all the major economic sectors. It is increasingly apparent there will be no easy return to business as usual. But since every crisis is also an opportunity, let's hear how we can rethink tourism after 2020. Our next panel discussion is all about planning the recovery of tourism for the long term. Panel moderator Anna Markovic is tourism professor and researcher, and she joins us from the Montenegrin metropolis of tourism, Budva. Good afternoon, Anna.
Hello, everyone. Radica, thank you very much for so nice introduction. I would like to say to all guests, attendees, and panelists that it is my utmost pleasure to be a moderator of this session. In the world today, our today's topic, travel and tourism, is really the hottest topic of all. Everyone and everywhere are discussing from the media to the streets, from the international organization to the national institution to the NGOs. We are all wondering whether tourism as we know it before it is end, and how the future of tourism will look like. So I know that we can discuss this topic on and on, but we are we have to follow our schedule. So briefly, I will just give a short introduction of the goal of our session, and I will introduce you all to the structure of our session. Regarding the goal of our session, in order to do so, we have to go back to the very roots of what really sustainable tourism means. And basically, it means to keep the equilibrium between three pillars: economy, ecology, and society. And in the decades and in the years before today, all our attention was mainly to the ecology and to the society, because these were the weakest links and the fragile pillars we had to take care about. But now in today's world, we have seen in only 6 months that economy, by all estimation, is also now going down. So this basically put us into two battles, two forefronts. One is to keep sustainability, and another is to ensure recovery. The region where I'm coming from, the Mediterranean region, is especially hit by this, since it's the region that it accounts for 1/3 of all international arrivals. It's the single strongest tourism region in the world, but also this is the region heavily affected by the mass tourism and heavily affected by ecological issues. I would just say one fact, for example, that 80% of all the goods we now consume in Europe is going through the Gibraltar. So you can imagine what a burden on our region is this. And within this region, our small country of Montenegro is also quite heavily hit, because we depend on tourism very much. It accounts at least, this is a conservative estimation, of 20% of our GDP. So we now have to think how to be optimistic in that sense. And I'm sure that instead of thinking that we now are facing with two battles for sustainability and the battle for recovery, we have to find a way with innovative solution to merge these two goals, and to use this situation not as a problem, not as a challenge, but as a solution. And I'm sure that our esteemed panelists and the keynote speaker who are with us today will provide really some fresh ideas about that. Second, I would like to give you a short introduction about the structure of our panel. We think that it is the best that we give the opportunity to our keynote speaker and the panelists to present what they have without interruption. And then this will be a first part. This will serve us as the baseline. And then in the second part, we will give them some questions. So I will start by giving them one or two questions, and I will invite the audience. But I use this opportunity for the audience. Please, this is not a one-way street. Do not think about this section as just you have to ask a question. Also, if you have some fresh, innovative idea, we would appreciate to share this with you. So we are now, I will briefly say just the names to see if everyone is here. Our keynote speaker of today is Mr. Damir Davidovic. Also today with us is Alessandra Priante. Hello, Alessandra, nice to meet you. Today with us is Mr. Matthias Beer and Mr. Dusan Lokic. So I will just give a short introduction before each panelist, and if our gentlemen, Mr. Beyer, Mr. Dusan Lokic, and Mr. Damir Davidovic don't mind, I will use the ladies' first option, and I will first announce our esteemed guest, Ms. Alessandra Priante. Ms. Alessandra Priante is the Regional Director for Europe at the World Tourism Organization. Before being appointed to this position, Ms. Priante has really impressive career in private and public sector, but also as well impressive career in diplomatic session. Ms. Alessandra Priante, I would like now to start with one quote. Secretary General for the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, sent a landmark message. I will now quote this message. Tourism can be a platform for overcoming pandemic. I encourage all those involved in the tourism sector to explore how we can recover better, including through climate actions and other steps that advance sustainability and build resilience. I am sure that World Tourism Organization is completely in line with this. And I wonder, what are your thoughts and ideas on the political and practical response to this challenge?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me in the Green Days Montenegro. And it's really a pleasure to be here. I would like to underline that the words of our Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, were actually perfectly, echoing a request that we gave him. So we not just follow them, we're actually, we are incarnate exactly what Antonio Guterres has said. Honestly, it's very difficult to draft one univoc answer, as much as it's not easy for each and every member state to draw a reaction to the pandemic, which is homogeneous with the rest. What is very clear is nobody was expecting this, and nobody was expecting this to target, especially to happen in probably, for us at UNWTO is the region that receives the majority of the international tourism arrivals. 51% is generated in region Europe. So nobody was expecting that this would actually happen in Europe. We were thinking in the beginning, oh, it's going to be another SARS. So it's going to be a minus 10% at the end of the year in that part of the world, but we're still going to cope with it here in the West. Reality is that probably because of the level of interconnection and the fact that this pandemic was very undervalued in the beginning, because there was some crossed information. Is it really bad, or is just a flu? Or so nobody really knew. But the governments then reacted very strongly, obviously, and each one of them had a different level of measures of restrictions. But what we noticed that the majority of the destinations in the world had travel restrictions. What's going to happen tomorrow is that the restrictions are going to be eased, especially from the European perspective. The borders are going to be lifted. So there's an expectation to resume travel. And when we've done our analysis, and we estimated, for example, that in the first 4 months, there was a decline of 44% in the international arrivals, 44%, yeah? We were coming from a forecast of +4, we go to -44. We had also elaborated some scenarios depending on the timing of the reopening. So reopening of July is minus this much. Reopening of September is minus this much. Reopening on December. Obviously, we're now in the best of the scenarios. And we need to resume. We need to restart tourism because, as Antonio Guterres said, tourism can be a platform to overcome the pandemic because tourism has proven to be one of these industries that can restart the economies of the world. It's a very large crossover industry. It's very horizontal, very transversal. It's nevertheless very clear, very focused. It has a lot of impact on the private sector, but not on a direct basis only, and of course, employment. Because it's not just hotels and establishments that have to do with tourism. It's everything in a destination that is involved. When we talk about tourism, is the agriculture, is the environment, is everything connected. So this is why it's very important. This is what we try to say, that sustainability, together with innovation, becomes the new normal. So the new normal meaning that it has to be embedded in the planning, and there needs to be situations whereby, and we are developing at UNWTO actually with the national MST, the global standards to measure sustainable tourism, there has to be a way to measure the achievement of sustainability for the different goals, and then to keep monitoring it. Something like having the target of Agenda 2030 or Agenda 2050, it's We need to understand that the pandemic has taught us a lesson. We were all very unprepared, but we were very unprepared because we were very lax, if you allow me, on actually letting all these numbers flow without a real control over it. We need to control the international flows. We need to control at destination level, at planning level, what we want to do for the following year. Because tourism as well is so relevant because it's really about the future. Summer 2020 is already gone in touristic terms. We're talking 2021, 2022. So the real questions that the tourism industry is asking itself right now is what is going to happen next year? What happens if we have a vaccine, if we don't have a vaccine? You know, that is, you know, the case is large, but definitely tourism has proven to be in many occasions, whether it was terrorism, whether it was environmental impact, whether it was, you know, natural disasters, whether it was, you know, situations like this one or SARS, tourism has proven to be the industry that can actually reactivate quicker. So it's the greatest hit, immediately hit, because of course, when you close a border, the immediate effect is on tourism, on in general of movements. But then it's also the industry that is able to restart immediately.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diante, and I hope we will have opportunity to explore this topic later in a discussion section. And now I would like to invite our esteemed panelist, Mr. Matthias Baer. Welcome. He is joining us from Berlin. Mr. Baer is founder and the owner of the Berlin-based consultancy company dealing with sustainable tourism for almost 20 years. Now, besides, Mr. Baer is a member of General Sustainable Tourism Council and a member of Sustainability Committee at the German Travel Association. Welcome, Mr. Baer, and what do you think, why resilience is so important to the tourism?
Yeah, thank you, Anja. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very delighted to join this conference. Maybe to answer your question, let me share my screen with you to I have a short presentation. I can do that, huh? So can you see my screen now? Can you just give me a short feedback?
Yes.
All right. Well, then I come back to your question, Anna. Thanks again for the invitation. Well, maybe you can, somebody has switched on his micro. Maybe we can switch it off. All right, thank you. Well, I would like to focus my short input a little bit on resilience, what is from my point of view, could be a long-term approach for future-oriented tourism development. And as Alessandra already mentioned, if we look at the situation before COVID-19, let's call it the old normal, there was a continuous development of tourism all over the world. We had a steady growth of tourism in many destinations. So, but now during COVID-19, it's new, it's an unknown situation for all of us. It is probably the biggest disaster in the history of tourism. So everybody looks how to survive, and also we are thinking about how to recover the whole sector that has been widely discussed. So what I would like to do in my short input is a little bit to focus on what should or could happen after COVID-19. And I think to do that, we should briefly reflect a little bit what was good, what was not so good with the old normal, and also think about the lessons learned of this COVID-19 pandemic. To do it very briefly, I would say if you look at the overall environment, I think we all are facing a certain speed of change. There's a huge volatility. If you look, for instance, at our consumers, there's a lot of uncertainty as well, ambiguity, and the whole world becomes more and more complex. And not only this, there are also many external influence factors that are facing our sector or that we have to deal with. I'm talking about, for instance, about the destination image and perception. We are talking about consumer consumption and booking behavior. We are talking also about digitalization, the mega trend, also demographic changes in our source markets, obviously also climate change and many other factors that are influencing our sector. And we have also to deal with some risk factors, internal risk factors and also external risk factors. For instance, if it comes to health risks like the COVID-19 pandemic, but we also had some other crises, as you know, in terms of Ebola and SARS, etc. We are facing natural disasters. We have to deal with terrorist threats after 9/11. There are also the risk of economic, financial crisis, political crisis, but also migration effects. So there are a number of risk factors that we also have to take into account if we ask us, okay, what will be after COVID-19? And as we already discussed before COVID-19, we have this phenomenon called over-tourism. So let's say it's about undesirable tourism development in some destinations, an increasing number of destinations, due to inappropriate tourism management. And on the other side, we also observe under-tourism in many destinations. So we have also a lot of destinations that are not properly developed due to missing an inappropriate tourism management, inappropriate marketing strategies, etc., or maybe also because of missing potential for tourism. And if we look at sustainable tourism, at sustainability, Alessandra also mentioned this, I think there is progress that we can observe over the years. But I think the truth is also that it's not actually penetrated. So we have to do more to be more sustainable and more successful in terms of ecological also and social requirements. So if we take this as a basis to analyze a little bit what was and ask us now, what does it mean for the future? From my point of view, if we ask what would be the key for long-term success for destinations, but also for enterprises, I think it lies in the resilience of the tourism sector. And resilience, from my point of view, requires a holistic development and a holistic management approach, which goes, from my point of view, beyond the present concept and also the present requirements of sustainable tourism. So my message would be, if we are talking about the recovery process that we are dealing with at the moment, which is necessary, which is obviously the way forward. But from my point of view, we should actually combine this recovery process also with rethinking and also redesigning and rebuilding the tourism sector based on the analysis that I made before to come to a real new normal. And to answer the question, Anna, what means, from my point of view, resilient tourism, I would say resilient tourism covers four main pillars. The first is about innovation and adaptation. That means what we need is, from my point of view, an integrative application, also constant streamlining of future-oriented and coherent tourism development approaches. So I'm talking about the ABC of tourism management. We have to be more creative, we have to be more agile, and we have also to find decentralized solutions for destination management, and also to think about the diversification of our tourism product and also about our markets, just to mention some examples. And the second major pillar from my point of view when it comes to resilient tourism is about anticipation and transformation. So it means, finally, for me, we need a regular observation of new developments, of new trends, and also a timely initiation of strategic and operational modification processes. So it is all about flexibility and changeability. So we have to anticipate new developments, such as with Airbnb. I think we overslept a little bit the whole development that came with Airbnb for the accommodation sector. Just to mention one example, what I mean with anticipation and with transformation. And the third pillar is about prevention and mitigation. So I think it is needed to think about an early identification and also taking adequate measures to avoid, or at least to minimize, negative effects of internal or external stress factors that I mentioned before. So it's also about security and stability if we are talking about resilience. And finally, it's about protection and preservation. So I think we also have to think about cross-sectoral and also consistent implementation of sustainability principles and standards along the entire value chain. We are already working on that since many years, but I think we have to penetrate this topic much more than in the past. So we also think about limits of acceptable change. We also have to think about limits of growth of our sector. It's also about regionalization. It's about values. It's also to substitute unsustainable forms of tourism. And it's, of course, also about participation of the local people. So I think that's, very briefly, would be my answer, what means resilient tourism for me. So to summarize this, I think if we want to become more resilient as a destination, I think we have to think about how to renew tourism through consistent tourism management and guaranteeing professionalism when it comes to tourism management. It's all about rebuilding tourism through proactive change management, seeking progress. It's about retaining tourism through comprehensive sustainability management to enable perspective for our sector, and finally, to remove tourism through serious risk management, taking precautions, finally. I think that would be, from my point of view, the way forward if we are discussing what needs to be done or how should tourism look like after COVID-19. And with this short input, I would like to thank you for your attention. And please, Anna, you can take over.
Thank you very much, Matthias. I think this was really valuable roadmap. You have shown us the really concrete steps that we have to take to obtain the resilient tourism. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to go back to Ms. Alessandra Priante. Alessandra, are you here with us? Oh, sorry, I have just received an information that Ms. Alessandra Priante had to go. Also, I would like to announce that Mr. Damir Davidovic is currently at the session of National Coordination Team held by our Prime Minister, and because of that, he might be a little bit late. So because of this new situation, I would not like now to ask technical support to show us our first video. This video is related to all the things that in Montenegro have been done so far in order to ensure low carbon tourism development. This is not just a few things, it's really a lot of things. I hope it will all fit in one video, and also in the previous session, some of the achievements was mentioned by Ivana Vojnovic, one of the panelists, who is also director at the Ministry of Sustainable Development and Tourism. So technical support, can we see the video, please? Hello again. I think that this video was the greatest introduction for our next panelist. And it says e-vehicles, e-cars are important. I have a great pleasure to announce Mr. Dusan Lukic. Mr. Dusan Lukic is an expert in e-mobility, and he's been doing this since the year of 1992, so it's almost 30 years time. During this time, Mr. Lukic has tested all e-vehicles available in the US market, available in European market, and some of the vehicles available in the Chinese market. Mr. Lukic, is this really true? When I read this, I thought, oh my God, I have to change the career. This is what I want to do. So Mr. Lukic will tell us something about the e-mobility and also how e-mobility is connected with the low carbon tourism development.
Hi Anna, hi everybody. Yeah, it's kind of true. Basically everything in Europe, most in the US, some in China, well, traveling there and so on. But now with this coronavirus and everything, it's kind of harder to do that. Also, yeah, I used to be a chief editor of biggest Slovenian car magazine and one of the first international electric car magazines. But since then I've switched jobs. I'm now with Porsche Slovenia, as you can see. And I'm in charge of not only e-mobility, but the complete new mobility. So all the new mobility solutions, multimodal transport, then also all the power solutions that we have. So basically, I'm together with my colleague, I'm trying to transform company from car importer to e-mobility or mobility solution provider. Why is that important? Well, if we go to the next slide. Well, I mean, what we think is that in all areas of our life, not only in tourism, but as today we are here about tourism, we have to do a big switch. We have to do a switch from consumerism, from overuse, from trying to do as much as possible to be as sustainable as possible. And if we look at tourism, I mean, Adriatic coast is mostly known for mass tourism. Even its most, let's call it, delicate locations, most famous locations that could be managed a little bit different, like Dubrovnik or some or similar in Croatia, they are just mass tourism. I think for Slovenia or for Montenegro or for many countries, the current events are showing us that mass tourism is probably not the way forward. That we will have to switch something, that we will have to do something. And one of the things that is quite popular right now, if we jump to the next slide, is e-mobility. So electric cars are really becoming to be popular right now. We are in an era that we are also experiencing a big switch in our mobility. Not just on the, let's call it, technical side, not just on the side that we are switching from gasoline and diesel cars to electric cars, but also on the ways that we are looking at mobility, that we are looking at it more and more as, let's call it, as a service. And that is a big deal that will also have an influence on tourism. I mean, we know that a lot of people are traveling sometimes with their cars just for fun. And that will kind of, I won't say that it will have to change, but with the advent of e-mobility, of shared mobility, it will change a little bit. You will combine different modes of travel when being a tourist. The other thing is, what we've learned is that there is a lot of people that are prepared to spend more money on being sustainable. Cars, electric cars are showing us that. The first cars that came on the market were quite expensive. Only now we are getting cheaper, but still, if you compare just the basic price, they are more expensive. If you compare the total cost of ownership, not anymore, but they are prepared to pay more, and I believe that they are prepared to pay more also in tourism for stuff like that. So one of the things that we were discussing here at Porsche Slovenia was, is there a way to combine those two things? And if we go to the next slide, and as I said, we are going from selling cars to providing mobility solution. And if we have a good mobility solution, if we have e-mobility solution, we can combine this with some other companies that are more in a sustainable tourism. And we are trying to find this kind of matches. And we for example, we have now one that we are just starting to cooperate with. But it is, I think it's quite interesting. That's why I chose it actually for this presentation, because it seems quite interesting to me. If we go to the next slide, and because we know what do we need in tourism right now? We need green destinations, of course, and that means that they are powered with green energy. We need the transport to the locations, between the locations, because some people or a lot of people don't want to just stay in one location. They want to explore. They would like to explore the whole country. But then again, if that means driving around a mass of tourists in a diesel rent-a cars, that's not sustainable. That's not green. So we need this, and of course we need the support systems to enable all of that. So we need to then offer people that want this kind of solutions. We need to offer them a possibility to act responsibly also as tourists. Let's call it ecologically responsibly. And also, solution like that could also help raising the awareness even between locals. So it is known that the trends in tourism are going from passive forms of mass tourism to more individual tourism. And the studies that the startup did also show that the people's awareness regarding environment goes beyond simple nature tourism. So it's not just camping in some nice part of woods without disturbing the nature. They want to have the experience, but they don't want to bother the environment. And also, they want to kind of have a good feeling after it, that they had a good experience, but still in a way did something for the environment. So what is actually the idea? Next slide is the project we call is, by the way, called Ego Zero. It's a small startup project. It's not completely new. They actually tried to do it a few years ago, but the idea is to bring the tourists in the most ecological way possible. But in the end, this is the part of travel that we don't have an influence on. So it's mostly, by planes, much nicer by train, but hey, that's how it is. You put them into electric cars, you guide them to green destinations. So the destinations that are ecological, that are powered by green power, that have their own, solar powers. So that are using locally produced food and so on and so on. So basically, you put in front of them an itinerary to see the best in the country, but do it in an ecological way. And also, what is extremely important here is that it's not only a tourist solution. So if you want to do it, you have to build infrastructure. All these tourism providers have to have their green energy. They have to have this, solar arrays. You have to set up charging stations for cars. And that means that you are also doing something for the country itself. So you're building the infrastructure in this country. And that is, I think, very, very important. And another thing is, if we change to next slide, it is not just building the infrastructure. You are, by doing that, also building the awareness within the country of the locals of e-mobility, of green tourism, and kind of invite them to also use it. So it's a win-win situation. On one side, you have a sustainable green tourism. On the other side, you're improving the country. You're improving the country itself. Why did we actually find this thing so interesting? Because of course we are trying to provide the mobility solutions for stuff like this, but also because it also brings good PR for the country and good PR for everybody involved in it. And I think what sometimes we tend to forget is that, yes, it's nice to do something good, but you also have to tell people about it. You have to tell the story, because the story becomes inspirational, then more and more people want to do it. And that means that you are sharing the good vibes, that you are sharing what you learned, and that means that the people will slowly or faster adopt it and do it. And of course, what is connected to that, then it is also interesting for the state itself. That means that you can get some help from the state, either in the form of subsidies or in the form of help with dealing with bureaucracy and so on. So basically, there is then a third partner, which is the state, that also can and should see this as a big positive thing. So I think this is not the only project like that. I think there are more and more projects like that. If we go to the next slide, and all of them should have just one thing in common. I mean, there should be no limits. There should be no really big guidance, except that all of them should be promoting sustainable and green tourism. We are into cars, we are into mobility solutions. This is something that is interesting for us. Somebody else will find something new, but as Matthias said, innovation and adaptation. So we have to find new models, each in our own area that we are covering. So I think a project like that could be a nice solution also for Montenegro, but basically it can also be just a kind of starting point for thinking what else we can do. So that's from my side. Thank you very much, and we'll see then in questions if somebody has something to ask.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Dusan Lukic, and I apologize one more time for not introducing all the important positions. I was simply overawed by the fact that I read about your career, so I forgot about all the other things. Sorry. I would like to ask you now some questions. What was the most what struck me most in your presentations is that you don't think just about the e-mobility, just about the e-vehicles, but you looked for the overall comprehensive solution to introduce this subject. And also you mentioned the role of the state on some part. So I ask you, can you imagine a day when we will all drive electric vehicles? How optimistic are you that this day will come soon? What we need what can speed up this transformation? You mentioned the role of the state in some sense. So I ask you, can you share us some experience from Slovenia in that sense?
Well, yeah, I mean,
can the state speed up this transformation and so on?
It sure can. I mean, when we're talking about, switching to electric cars, it will happen sooner or later, unless some new technology comes along in this time. But we have a lot of cars on the road, and it's not, even if we would I don't know, forbid selling of anything but electric cars today, that would still mean that we would need to spill over to owners of older and older used cars. It would still take us 10, 15, maybe 20 years, depending on the country. Which is good, because the infrastructure needs to be built, and it cannot be built overnight, and it should not be built overnight, because if you build it overnight, you will overbuild it, and then again we are out of the sustainable and green area. But when we come to the state, yeah, it has its place. I mean, there are people that say that there should be no subsidies for electric cars, which might be true. I mean, personally, I think there is still a place for subsidies for, I don't know, for a foreseeable future, for a few years at least, until, I don't know, at least, let's call it, I don't know, 5 or 10% of the cars on the road are electric. But then again, the bigger part, that's what we see in Slovenia, of the state influence, should be forcing the organizations that are managing the infrastructure. So forcing the energy providers, the energy grid maintainers, forcing the bureaucracy that directs or allows or disallows when you can put, I don't know, a solar power plant or charging station. So they would have, state has to do that. They have to provide a baseline for everybody that we can do it without big problems, and then we should all compete. Because if we don't compete, we don't innovate, and so on. So basically, there is a way, but it's not just give me 10,000 euros subsidy for electric car. That is, I think, most definitely not the way forward.
So we have to have to find the balance between the state role and the private sector free competition. Thank you very much. This was very inspiring. Mr. Baer, I will now go back to your presentation. You have talked to us about the resilient tourism. So I already told you have almost 20 years in experience about the sustainable development. How optimistic are you that we will build, that we will be able to build resilient, sustainable tourism? This is the first question. And the second one is, I didn't mention this before, but you really have an extensive experience with the Western Balkan region and of course Montenegro. You have been doing numerous projects in this region. And can you tell us, in your opinion, what are the strengths and weaknesses of our region in building up resilient tourism? And can you send some message for Montenegro? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Well, let me start with your first question on my optimism. Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm working since almost 20 years as a consultant in sustainable tourism. So I wouldn't do that if I wouldn't be optimistic. So I have been optimistic, I am optimistic, and I will be optimistic because I'm totally convinced, as also Dusan said, we have to adapt us, we have to innovate us also in the tourism sector, not only in terms of mobility, I think along the whole value chain. And I see progress. I think there is a raising awareness among policymakers, among the private sector, also among the consumers. And I think there is no other choice. I mean, we have to become more resilient in the future. Otherwise, we will fail, as we have seen in some examples, negative examples all over the world in the past. So I think if the awareness is there, I think the instruments are also there. They only need to be applied and implemented. So yes, I am optimistic for the future.
It's good. And about our region?
Yeah, as you said, I had the pleasure to work in many of the Balkan countries, like Montenegro, Serbia, and also Albania and some other countries. So from my point of view, if you ask me for, let's say, an advice or recommendation, the first would be we should really think about that we avoid one-sided dependence on tourism. What I'm observing, not only in the Balkan region, also all over the world, I've worked in more than 50 countries. So it's always they see tourism as the sector for the future, it's the sector for economic prosperity. It is an important sector, but we see how vulnerable on the other side tourism can be if we look at the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think the first measure would be to avoid one-sided dependency on tourism. We have to find or we have to work on a diversified economic structure where tourism is one important pillar, but not the only one, not the most important one from my point of view. Another point, if I look, let's say, with the eyes of a consumer on the Balkan region, I'm asking myself where I would spend my next holidays in the Balkan region. It's quite difficult because I don't see the differences. So if I look at Serbia or Montenegro or Albania, Kosovo, North Macedonia, they seem for me quite similar in terms of the tourism offer, in terms of the natural resources, in terms of cultural issues, etc. For sure, there are differences, but they need to be actually figured out for the consumer. That must be more transparent to the consumer. So I think we should work more on the improvement of our branding and positioning in each country, working on our unique selling proposition, and also to think about how can we actually differ us in terms of the tourism product. Because as you know, all countries are dealing with hiking, with biking, with mountain biking, trekking, etc. So there's no difference. So I need to see as a tourist, okay, what is so attractive that I decide to go to Montenegro and not to one of the neighboring countries, or the other way around. So I think branding positioning would be a topic that I would see as a task for the future, where it's room for improvement. And I think if we look at the international audience, we should more focus on cross-border tourism, because that's a very exciting product for many foreigners, not only to visit one country, and you have the possibilities. Just to mention an example, if you go to the Peak of Balkans region in Albania, you can actually cross-border hiking trail. You have cross-border hiking trails between Albania, Montenegro, and Kosovo. That's a really nice and exciting product for the tourist. And I think so we should think about, okay, how can we link forces, and how can we actually promote more cross-border offers for the tourist? And on the other side, not only to focus on the international audience, I think not only because of COVID, but also from the point of view of resilience, we should think about more to improve more or to develop more domestic and regional tourism. I think if we want to become more resilient, it is absolutely important to have a good mix of markets. So the international market, the domestic, and the regional market. And as we can see all over the world, those destinations that depend extremely on the international market are struggling at the moment, because there was no strategy for domestic tourism. So I think that's another advice. And if I have the time, I would add 2 other points, and then I will get back to you. Okay. I think another point is, from my point of view, to think about risk management and risk communication. That means to develop and also to implement proper risk management and communication strategies. As we can see in the short term with COVID-19, now we have to work on standard operating procedures for trust building, that actually to bring back our consumers, our visitors, but also for trust building among the airlines, among the tour operators. So that would be one point, but it's not only about COVID. I think it's also about many other issues. As I said before in my input, there are many risk factors. Just to mention some other examples, we know, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of hiking, a lot of biking, mountain biking offers in the region. But what about rescue and safety plans? I'm not sure about if we are really prepared in the region in terms of rescue and safety when it comes to an accident. So I think it's also a question of risk management, also in terms of resilience, in terms of also, let's say, the image of a destination, that these plans are in place. And in the long term, if we talk about risk, I think it's also a matter of dealing with climate change. So it's all about climate protection, but also climate mitigation. So there are many risk factors that we have to take into account, also at local, or that means at national level, but also at regional level. And the last point, it's maybe related to sustainability. I think we should be aware about, and I think everybody's aware about, that tourism is probably the only sector that depends so much on cultural and natural resources, intact natural and cultural resources. So we have to ask ourselves how we can actually conserve and preserve these resources, because this is our basis. Without nature, without culture, we can't offer tourism. And I think it's still a little bit underestimated in many areas, not only tourism, but also in other sectors. So my advice or my recommendation would be, let's focus on that. Let's do our homework as tourism sector to preserve our resources, and also to lobbying others that they also help us, because we are sometimes, let's say, a causer of negative impacts on the environment or on cultural assets, but also sometimes a victim, because also others cause negative impacts, and we have to lobbying them. And maybe, and that would be my last sentence, maybe my last message, maybe tourism should be, let's say the pioneer or the forerunner in the field of nature and cultural and environmental protection, and set a good example also for others, because of the dependence that we have with these resources.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bayer. Also, yesterday we have heard from the keynote speaker of our conference, Mr. Janez Potočnik, that also tourism is an accelerator of circular economy, because it is connected with all different economies such as construction, traffic, trade, and so on and so off. So it's one more burden on the tourism we have. So I have to announce that unfortunately Mr. Damir Davidovic, the State Secretary for Tourism, will not be able to join us today because he is still at a meeting of National Coordination Body that is meeting regularly, almost at a daily basis, examining the health situation and making decisions about the tourism. So this is the vivid, the live example of how situation is ongoing now, how it is difficult to have any plan, let alone policy in a long term. I am sorry for that, but I hope that we will have an opportunity to meet with Damir Davidovic some other time. I will now, before we go to the questions and answers from, and I see that a lot of the questions are coming, I would like to ask technical support to show us a second video. This video is a message, and it is really a strong message from our famous regional artist, Mr. Antonije Pušić. Mr. Pušić is well known under his artistic name, Rambo Amadeus, and I cannot say he's so multi-talented artist that I cannot fit him in any kind of artistic session. So please, if technical support can show us his message.
Ja sam Rambo Amadeus, muzičar, jedriličar i ekološki aktivista. U okviru mojih ekoloških aktivnosti, uz pomoć mojih dragih prijatelja i organizacije UNDP, napravio sam solarni jedrenjak. Potpuno autonoman, bezšuman jedrenjak koji za svoje kretanje koristi isključivo sunce i vjetar, a namijenjen je ponudi u nautičkom turizmu u akvatoriju Crne Gore. Evo, ovih dana smo svedoci apsurda. Dok je čitav turizam zaustavljen zbog pandemije korone, naše okruženje izgleda nikad privlačnije. Besprekorno čisto more, vazduh, očaravajuća tišina podsjetili su nas na to koliko je zapravo priroda zavodljiva i lijepa kad se isključi sva mehanizacija na koju smo navikli u prošlom vijeku. Vjerujem da će ovaj period tišine i besprekorno čiste prirode uticati na nas da ubrzamo prihvatanje novih, čistih i bezšumnih tehnologija u turizmu i time dati naš doprinos revitalizaciji prirodnog okruženja. Očekujem da će vlasnici smještajnih kapaciteta u ovom periodu tišine izračunati koliko se solarni sistemi za grijanje vode i proizvodnju struje zapravo isplate, da će u saobraćaj hrabrije početi da se koriste električni skuteri, bicikli, električna vozila, da će se u Boki razviti linijski brodski saobraćaj koji povezuje gradove i tako smanjiti saobraćajne gužve koje će početi čim se korona povuče. Moj najveći izazov je da utičem na promjenu fizionomije nautičkog turizma. Umjesto bučnih motornih jahti i jeke dizel mašina, prljave tehnologije iz preprošlog vijeka, da u Boki i čitavom crnogorskom akvatorijumu vidimo više bezšumnih jedrilica, katamarana i plovila na električni pogon koji svoje baterije pune uz pomoć solarnih panela. Današnja tehnologija omogućuje da nam prirodno okruženje bude besprekorno čisto, zdravo, da uživamo u prirodi i tišini, a da pritom turizam kao naša strateška privredna grana cvjeta, i to bolje nego do sada. Savremeni turista upravo bježi od buke i zagađenja, pa je vrijeme da se prilagodimo novim potrebama tržišta, ali i da sačuvamo ono što je i za turizam i za živote svih nas dragocjenije. To je netaknuto prirodno okruženje. Za kraj, nadam se da ono čime se bavim nije puko informisanje, nego vaspitanje, a vaspitanje je informacija plus emocija. Dakle, to ide ili uz kaznu ili uz smijeh. Pošto na sreću nikog ne mogu da kaznim, smijeh smatram svojim najboljim dostupnim oružjem u prevaspitanju ljudi. Kome snaga leži u fosilnom gorivu, tragovi mu smrde zagađenjem.
I think that this is a really strong message. In the meantime, we have received some questions. The first question we have received is from our esteemed United Kingdom ambassador here in Montenegro, Ms. Alison Kemp. It is to the old panelists, but she is mentioning Mr. Baer. So, Mr. Baer, be prepared. The question is, Mr. Baer talked about under and over tourism. I'd be interested to hear a bit more about how a destination can reduce tourism to a sustainable levels and the impact on the cruise industry of COVID-19 and how to build that for underdeveloped areas. And lastly, any top tips on how season can be extended. Thank you, Alison Kemp. So Matthias, can you reflect on this?
I can reflect on this. There are many questions, many different questions, many interesting questions. So maybe let me start with over and under tourism. First of all, I think it needs to be mentioned that we always talk about over tourism, but in the global discussion, nobody is discussing really under tourism. I think that's also a big issue because many destinations, especially the remote areas, are really underdeveloped. And the question is why? And just to answer on that, I think one reason is that they don't have enough potential. So if people thinking about how beautiful it is, it doesn't mean automatically that they have potential for tourism, because beautiful it's a very let's say superficial way of analyzing this. Beautiful means a lot, can be or could mean a lot, but it's not sufficient actually to become competitive and successful destination. So we have to think about the potential, we have to analyze the potential, and then to think about, okay, how can we properly manage and develop tourism? That's all about the destination management. It's about the product, it's about the appropriate markets, it's about the staffing, it's about education and training. So many points that needs to be taken into account to become a competitive and a successful destination. And what I am suffering in is that many destinations don't have this condition. So we have to work on these issues. It's all about, as I mentioned before, it's about innovation and also adaptation. And on the other side, with the over tourism, is actually it's overdeveloped, it's overcrowded. So it's also a lack of management. So if you only look at let's say profit maximization, if you only look at growth, I'm absolutely sure you will fail, because there are limits of growth, there are limits of acceptable change, and we have to manage this, and we have to be aware about that. We can't only look for a growth strategy. We also have to balance growth and economic prosperity with social and ecological requirements, and this is all about this is what sustainability is about. And there are certain criteria. We have, for instance, this global sustainable minimum standards that are helpful for destinations to actually manage tourism in a proper manner. And last point, it was also mentioned, the cruise industry. Well, that's an interesting topic. It's obviously not a really sustainable industry, and I know there are a lot of problems in Montenegro, but also in many other destinations, in terms of environmental pollution, but also in terms of working conditions and other things. So the interesting thing will be what happens with the cruise industry. I have my doubts that they come back as it was before, because first of all, we have our standard operating procedures, we have social distancing. So how should it work with a cruise ship where you have 3,000 clients and another 2,000 staff members? It's impossible. So you can't guarantee social distancing as it was before. So the question is, are the visitors willing to come back, are willing to book such cruise offers? Or do they say, no, we don't want this anymore, because they are afraid about the conditions, they are afraid about to become sick and actually prefer another offer or another form of traveling. So it's difficult to say at the moment what's happening with the cruise industry, but I think at the moment obviously they are struggling, and I think also in the next month they will struggling. And it's a question of marketing, but also in terms of trust building from the sector, that they actually have proper solutions to convince people that it is safe to travel with a cruise ship, and then probably they also have the chance to come back, because that's one of the biggest and most successful tourism products that we had in the last years. So I think people love to join cruise trips. So it depends on the industry actually to find solutions to recover themselves.
Thank you, Matthias. Ms. Kemp sent corrections. She meant demand for the underdeveloped areas.
Yeah.
So you basically covered this, but we also have some here in Montenegro. We also have some underdeveloped areas, mainly in the north, as you are familiar. We have this discrepancy between south and north, and in your opinion, how it is in the eyes of the German tourists? So far, probably it doesn't exist, but what can be done in that sense?
Well, first of all, we are allowed to travel again. I think it doesn't look so bad for the summer season, at least in the European Union. So people are starting to travel again to Spain, also to Greece and other Mediterranean countries, and we will see how it works. Actually, it depends obviously on the standard operating procedures in the countries. So that these are good along the whole supply chain. I'm not talking about airports and not only about hotels. It's about the whole supply chain that actually needs these standard operating standards, like souvenir shops, like the tour guides, like the buses, and any other tourism supplier that is directly or indirectly involved in the tourism. So if this is in place and actually applied in an appropriate manner, I think then we have a chance also to recover the tourism quite quick, actually. But let's see. I mean, the first Germans came 2 weeks ago to their preferred island called Mallorca in Spain. So we were allowed to travel as Germans to Spain, not the Spanish people. I mean, that's also a point that you can discuss. But anyway, it underlines how important Germans are for the tourism market. And we wait when they come back and see what happens. Actually, it's a little bit a black box to see what consequences that could have. But in general, I think what you can do as the destination, it's all about communication and trust building. It's about this mentioned standard operating procedures that need to be in place. You have to work on trust building among the consumers, but also among the tour operators, where the visitors or the tours are booking their trips. And the second is obviously the airplane. If you don't have any air connection, nobody will come. So it's also linked with each other to work on maybe bilateral opportunities between Germany and Montenegro, for instance, that there are direct flight connections, because that's a precondition. Otherwise, nobody will come. And the third is obviously about the product, that you have actually also a diversified product that actually gives you more flexibility, because not Montenegro, not any other Balkan country should depend on the Germans or any international tourists. We should also look at the domestic and the regional market. I think that's a short-term message that you should undertaken, because this year probably it will be a bit difficult to recover the tourism sector. So I think for September, October, November, there are chances for the domestic and regional market. And let's hope, based on the experiences with this summer season, that we can also get back the international audience within the next year.
Yes, and what we have seen so far is a different, everyday changing response from country to country. Basically, passengers are confused. Is my airline canceled? Can I travel? Yeah. What are the conditions there? What are conditions there? It's changing. So in general, yes, probably we would need some, let's say, joint response between the countries. I would like to use this opportunity to thank Ms. Kemp for joining us. Also, we have seen her yesterday in her inspiring speech. Thank you for taking the time to be on this session too. Now I would go back to the next question. We have a question from Alexandra from the UNDP. How do we secure investment in green solutions when the economy is in crisis? For example, Dusan mentioned that there are sustainable customers willing to pay more. Is it expected in the time of crisis? Yes, really. Is it good time to ask for people to invest more when they are concerned about their jobs? Green solution investments, electric cars, green energy sources, sustainable construction. What is the role of digitalization in overcoming the situation and the future of tourism? So I guess the first question would go to Dusan, and the second one to Matthias about the digitalization.
Well, I mean, the experience that we had, not just in Slovenia, generally, for example, in Europe with e-mobility and this crisis, is that, for example, when we look at the sales of the cars, they just went down completely. But electric cars sales went down much less than sales of classic cars. And also, when people started buying, they climbed up faster. Quite similar goes actually to solar power plant charging stations. So the recovery, at least in our experience, is much faster. And I think in general, when you're talking about customers that have a little bit more money, that can afford stuff like that, they're usually the customers that have some savings, have a little bit better job, so have a little bit more self-confidence or confidence in the market, in their financial future and so on. So they can do it easier. Also, the companies plan these things in advance. What is important to know here is that if a company is just planning to replacing one van with another, or car with another, this is a short-term solution. They need the car, they will drive it for 3 years, they will change it. If there is a little bit of financial squeeze because of the crisis, then they'll just use this one for 4 years instead of 3, defer it for 1 year, it's easy. When you're talking about moving to a completely new playing field, moving to e-mobility, to own production of green energy, these are long-term plans. So basically, you will have to do it. So if the crisis is not really bad, and I think this one wasn't that bad actually, then you go on with these plans because you have planned them. They will pay off. If you look at this solar power plant, it's 10-15 year project. There will be bad years in this 10-15 years, so there is much less need to react immediately and cut everything immediately and switch it to future years. So yeah, I mean, of course, it did influence also the mobility, the green energy production, but not as much as you would think at the first sight. So it is still possible to expect people that to use these solutions that we were talking about, to have these more expensive, more green holidays. Plus, of course, we also have to know that these people want to show that, and more people actually, what happened in this crisis we could see, because we weren't traveling, we were driving less, there was less pollution, the air was cleaner, the water was cleaner. People realized, a lot of people that didn't realize before realize now, that what we do actually influences the environment. So not driving an old diesel car does actually have an influence on the air in the city, and so on and so on. So that's another plus for the switching the tourism to more sustainable, to more ecological side. And okay, Matthias will also answer it, but as for digitalization, I mean, the digitalization is a natural fit for this, because you want to people to have immediate access to everything they want to know. on the other side, you want to have their data. You want to have a lot of data so you can analyze it, you can predict it. I mean, if you're talking about resilient, yeah, if you can plan what will happen, if you have this, I don't know, machine learning and so on, so you have this predictive knowledge, what could happen if some small things change, then it's also much easier to implement all the good practices of risk management and to see that you're actually what you're doing in tourism is more resilient. As I said, I think Matthias knows more about it than me.
And Dusan, we understand that, and it's really good thing that you shared with us, that financially stable companies and people are really diverting, even in this crisis, they are diverting to e-mobility. And I guess next challenge would be to approach everyone else, the other class types, let's say, so conditionally. Yeah. So yes, maybe you can reflect this. And also there is one more question for you, Dusan, before we go back to Matthias with the digitalization. This is a question from Mr. Cornel Pap. Obviously, he is coming to us from Hungary. He says that Montenegro is a small country in the region, and he thinks this is unparalleled potential for a green growth, because being small, it's obviously much more easy due to this size to impose electrical transport and find some ideal solution, even with the cars with a small range and so on. And he thinks that the key issue is the composition of the support that will make these products available. He says, for example, in Hungary, there are measures and examples these measures and examples, are also extremely important. Green license plates, tax and fee discounts, initially free public charging, support for the home solar systems combined with electrical storage and home charging, and so on and so on. Several of these Hungarian models and experience could be incorporated into Montenegro plans. Has this possibility for a cooperation between explored with regard to the two nearby countries, Montenegro and Hungary? If so, is it possible to learn more about these researchers? I must say that the United Nations Development Programme has also supported through the low carbon tourism development many of these things, such as eco charging points, and also free of charge for the first year, or such as solar panel and so on. Also, in your presentations, you have already covered this holistic approach with the state subsidies and so on. So maybe we can just reflect this. If so, is it possible to learn more about these researchers and the cooperation between, let's say, neighboring countries? Obviously, we cannot speak on behalf of Hungary, but on behalf of the region. So do you have any idea?
Well, not of the corporation as such, but I know quite a lot of what is happening in these neighboring countries, and most of, the basic approach is quite similar. There are differences. For example, subsidies for cars. Some countries want to give them, some not. But then the countries that don't give direct subsidies, then maybe they just don't do sales tax on cars and stuff like that. But most of the other stuff is similar. So most of the countries have some kind of schemes for people that want to do their own green energy, solar power plants, small micro turbine, wind power plants, and so on. Most of the countries, in most of the countries, you have free parking when you're charging electric car, even though normal parking has to be paid. Free public charging, yes, at the beginning, but that's one of the things that we've learned, not just here, but in most of the countries, that when if the charging is free, then people just misuse it to park the cars for free, so you have to charge it. But yeah, there are let's call it a standard set of things that you can do. It's like 5, 10, 15, where you can pick and choose, but basically what you have to do is it's not it's not just giving stuff away for free. It's not just giving the money for subsidies, giving free charging station. It's about creating an ecosystem for people that want to go green. So they want to have an electric car, they want to have their own solar power plant, which first is easy for them to live in. So, you have to have infrastructure. If somebody buys an electric car, there is not a nice thing that you cannot then go to half of the country because there is no infrastructure there. And on the other hand, you have to make them feel that they did something good for themselves and and for the neighbors and for the country. So you have to avoid negative things. You have to you shouldn't make them feel punished. I mean, sometimes the bureaucracy connected to all of this is so big that people just feel stupid that they even started thinking about it. So I think that's a bigger no than just missing some of the nice experiences and models that have worked in other countries. Because, for example, there are big cities that have these bus lanes and so on, which could be used by electric cars, and some cities don't have them. Or if you have too many electric cars, they will just clog down these lanes. So you have to be flexible. You have to adjust. But in the end, the basic thing is the same. You have to think holistically. You have to create the whole ecosystem, not just one part. Otherwise, the system becomes unbalanced, and then you have a problem.
Do you see any potential for a regional cooperation? I mean, you said you reflected regarding the private sector, but what about the public sector?
I mean, the nice thing that would happen, but it is actually again more in the private than in the public sector, is, for example, we have some of the projects that are spreading the infrastructure from charging infrastructure, for example, for electric cars from country to country. We have these roads that are slowly being covered by charging stations, so you can travel, so you can be tourists, so you can, I don't know, drive from Germany to Montenegro in an electric car. But as it turns out, usually it's private companies that do it, but with some kind of help or subsidies from the public money. So I think my point of view is to set up programs in which innovative new companies can apply for some either money or help in other way to do those projects, but to let the private sector actually develop that. Because I mean, we have big multinationals. We have like Croatian Telecom that is setting up charging stations in Croatia. They are also, I think they already set up the first few in Montenegro.
Yes.
Or Petrol from Slovenia is the same. They also have, so you will have this company, you will have this private initiative. You just have to help them.
Yes, thank you. And also, you really pointed out the one most important. It's that we need to change the mindset of the community to drive this. It doesn't. We can do all the things that we have to do regarding the infrastructure, but the mindset is also important. And also, I had the privilege to be involved on behalf of municipality of Budva in setting up a first public eco charging point in Budva, first two charging stations. And I can tell you this was really an experience because the institutions are really totally unprepared for this. And we thought it would be a 15 days job, but it was 6 months hard work because we don't have regulations. Is it a temporary location? Is it a permanent location? What do we do? We have to cooperate with electric power company. And I guess this is what you were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine somebody having a few vacation homes or, I don't know, chain of hotels or restaurants and setting up one of these charging stations and having this experience that you had? I think even if that company or person has money, is eco conscious, if he has a experience like that, that project will probably stop, because nobody is going to go through this project like 10 or 15 times, and that's one of the biggest problems that we have.
Yes, I can tell you, I was very happy that I have one lawyer in my team to examine through all the laws and sub-laws to find all the holes, how we can legally put it. And it is really important to put it. Thank you so very much. Matthias, now we will go back to the digitalization. Obviously, it is taken our lives. I feel like we are all going just from one Zoom to another, from Skype to Zoom, from one online session to another. How this will reflect on tourism?
Yeah, as you said, I mean, obviously, it's something, but nobody can actually avoid. Even this conference, I mean, nobody's allowed to travel, but we are all together here via Zoom or via any other provider. So that has a lot of implications. It has also a lot of advantages, I think. It also has to do with tourism, obviously, because what we are doing here is actually a professional conference that could be also take place in Montenegro or in any other Balkan country, but now we do it virtually. Of course, because of COVID-19, but if you look at the future, I think that will be the future also for the business trips. Yeah, if you look at the consumer and speak first of all about the business trips or business clients that normally are used to use airplanes to travel from one meeting to the other, and I think that will change. That will absolutely change. I can tell you, for instance, in Germany, there's a huge discussion on that they probably that we will not have domestic flights between the bigger cities. For instance, between Berlin and Munich or Berlin and Frankfurt. That's discussed because they think there is no demand, and there's also a need to answer and to respond to climate protection. So we have to think about, okay, what does it mean in terms of consumer behavior and also in terms of the product that we have to offer to the clients. So I think there will be a shift in the business trips due to digitalization. But also, if you look at the holiday makers, at the normal consumer that we are dealing with, there is a huge influence due to digitalization. It starts with informing. How do I inform myself? If you look at the surveys in the European Union, the majority uses internet and not anymore guiding books or any other sources. The same is with booking. More and more people don't go to the travel agency or to a tour operator. They use online travel booking machines. And so on and so on. So the influence is there. And the question is, I think, from the point of view of a destination, what does it mean for us? How do we actually have to react and to deal with it? And I think here probably we have some things to discuss and also some weaknesses in terms, again, of innovation and adaptation. We have to adapt this to the digitalization process and also to the new consumer behavior. It starts simply with having a proper internet website. It starts with having a proper social media presence. So we have to skill our tourism providers in that, especially the smaller ones. Also the older ones, they're not belonging to the millennials, so they know how to deal with these technical issues, but the older ones know. So we have to skill them, we have to teach them. And also to enable them to work, for instance, with booking machines like Booking.com or Airbnb. It's especially for small providers in remote areas, I think, a big chance to get direct access to the markets and don't depend on tour operators and international market access, so they can actually have a deal directly with the consumer. So there are many points actually that need to be taken into account from the point of view of a destination. And moreover, it's also about visitor channeling. You can also use digitalization for visitor channeling. For instance, if you have overcrowded destination, that helps you a little bit to guide, to manage the visitor flow. It's also about, I think, when it comes to training and education, you can also use digital solutions. So everybody is talking about on-site trainings, on-site education, which is nice, but it also has disadvantages because you don't reach a huge number of people. So if you switch to micro-learning approaches, if you switch to mobile learning approaches, I think that will be the future also in terms of workforce development. So I think there is a big chance, and I can tell you, just to give you two small examples from our own work, we work on set solutions because we believe that will be the future, because we have a big lack of quality among the staff. We have a big lack of education needs. So to overcome this, I think the micro-learning, bite-sized learning, mobile learning approach could be a solution to get a better quality among the staff. And the same is with other purposes, for instance, visitor surveys. Everybody wants to know what thinks the visitor, but nobody is able to do visitor service because it's very expensive. I think also here we are working on digital solution and try to find solution for the market, for the destinations, that it becomes more less expensive and more effective, and that they have a stable reaction and a stable feedback from the client. So I think there are many things where digitalization is influencing tourism from the point of view of the consumer, but also from the point of view of the destination.
Yes, exactly. So far, we have struggled even with the, let's say, applicable software, and now we are entering in the field where we will use IT solution for a deep business intelligence, as also, and as Dusan mentioned, artificial intelligence. This will be a huge a topic at all. So now we are approaching to the end of our session. I would like to say one more comment. It's Biljana Božović from the National Tourist Organization. She commented that that good example of sustainable public transport is Bela Boka in Boka Bay, in Boka Kotorska Bay, and that we need more projects like that and support from the public sector to the similar project or incentive measures. We have already mentioned this before. Now, I will ask you, Matthias and Dusan, if you can just summarize in one, let's say 1 minute, one final remark for this before we close. Who wants to go first?
Please go ahead. Then I have some more time to think about.
Okay, so I'll just touch this last question that you mentioned, Anna. Yeah, I mean, if we would replace all the cars with the electric cars, we would have the same amount of cars on the road that we have now, and we want to reduce it. Yeah, that's why I'm saying it goes for tourism, it goes for other industries, it goes for our entire life. We have to look at the things as a package holistically, because then we know that if a product is good, if a solution is good, if a service is good, that it's bigger than the sum of its parts. So we can actually reduce the number of parts. We can reduce the number of cars. We can reduce the usage of electricity. We can reduce many things if we go at it in a way that we combine all these parts into a machine that functions properly. Sustainable tourism is a great example of a machine that can work this way and can reduce the negative influences on the environment, on the local population, and so on. So basically, I think what we have to take away from this today is that it is nice to find great small solutions, but actually Montenegro as a state should think about a whole solution and how to then incorporate these nice small solutions into it and how to support them.
Thank you. Very important message, not only for the EU mobility, but for all other aspects in our country. Matthias?
Yeah, when I reflect actually what we have discussed and also the question that has been made by our audience, I think it's again underlines how important innovation adaptation is. We have actually to see tourism as a constant process of innovation adaptation. It's not a stable thing, and it's also about anticipating new trends and new developments like the digitalization issue that has been mentioned, plus the sustainability issue and all about risk management. I think these are the four angles that we actually have to focus on in the future. From my point of view, I would say that's about resilience. You can take also, or you can also define it in another way, but I think these are the four pillars that needs to be addressed for the future tourism development, not only in the Balkan region, I think in general, also as lessons learned from COVID-19 and as reflection from the old normal before COVID-19.
Thank you, Matthias, very much. Once again, it was my utmost pleasure to be a moderator of this panel. I'm sure that we have sent some strong messages, and I'm sure that we are on our way to the green recovery and that we are on our way to develop a sustainable tourism. I wish you all good luck in your further work regarding this. And I'm giving the word to Radica and to Sanja to close this session.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this great panel and also for these amazing 2 days. Unfortunately, it's time for us to wrap up. So I would invite all of those watching us on the live stream to enjoy the highlights of this last panel and the ending trailer of the conference. And now, thank you for everything.
Thank you for making our online talks a success, with more than 400 of you joining us virtually from 20 countries. I wish you a wonderful summer. See you all next year for more Green Talks. Stay healthy. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Ja sam Rambo Amadeus, muzičar, jedriličar i ekološki aktivista. U okviru mojih ekoloških aktivnosti, uz pomoć mojih dragih prijatelja i organizacije UNDP, napravio sam solarni jedrenjak. Potpuno autonoman, bešuman jedrenjak koji za svoje kretanje koristi isključivo sunce i vjetar, a namijenjen je ponudi u nautičkom turizmu u akvatoriju Crne Gore. Evo, ovih dana smo svedoci apsurda. Dok je čitav turizam zaustavljen zbog pandemije korone, naše okruženje izgleda nikad privlačnije. Besprekorno čisto more, vazduh, očaravajuća tišina podsjetili su nas na to koliko je zapravo priroda zavodljiva i lijepa kad se isključi sva mehanizacija na koju smo navikli u prošlom vijeku. Vjerujem da će ovaj period tišine i besprekorno čiste prirode uticati na nas da ubrzamo prihvatanje novih, čistih i bešumnih tehnologija u turizmu i time dati naš doprinos revitalizaciji prirodnog okruženja. Očekujem da će vlasnici smještajnih kapaciteta u ovom periodu tišine izračunati koliko se solarni sistemi za grijanje vode i proizvodnju struje zapravo isplate, da će u saobraćaj hrabrije početi da se koriste električni skuteri, bicikli, električna vozila, da će se u Boki razviti linijski brodski saobraćaj koji povezuje gradove i tako smanjiti saobraćajne gužve koje će početi čim se korona povuče. Moj najveći izazov je da utičem na promjenu fizionomije nautičkog turizma. Umjesto bučnih motornih jahti i jeke dizel mašina, prljave tehnologije iz preprošlog vijeka, da u Boki i čitavom crnogorskom akvatorijumu vidimo više bešumnih jedrilica, katamarana i plovila na električni pogon koji svoje baterije pune uz pomoć solarnih panela.
Now in the best of the scenarios. And we need to resume. We need to restart tourism because, as Antonio Guterres said, tourism can be a platform to overcome the pandemic because tourism has proven to be one of these industries that can restart the economies of the world. It's a very large crossover industry. It's very horizontal, very transversal. It's nevertheless very clear, very focused. It has a lot of impact on the private sector, but not on a direct basis only, and of course, employment. Because it's not just hotels and establishments that have to do with tourism. It's everything in a destination that is involved. When we talk about tourism, is the agriculture, is the environment, is everything connected. So this is why it's very important. This is what we try to say, that sustainability, together with innovation, becomes the new normal. So the new normal meaning that it has to be embedded in the planning, and there needs to be situations whereby, and we are developing at UNWTO actually with the national MST, the global standards to measure sustainable tourism, there has to be a way to measure the achievement of sustainability for the different goals. And then to keep monitoring it. Something like having the target of Agenda 2030 or Agenda 2050, we need to understand that the pandemic has taught us a lesson. we were all very unprepared. But we were very unprepared because we were very lax, if you allow me, on actually letting all these numbers flow without a real control over it. We need to control the international
crisis. I think it lies in the resilience of the tourism sector. And resilience, from my point of view, requires a holistic development and a holistic management approach, which goes, from my point of view, beyond the present concept and also the present requirements of sustainable tourism. So my message would be, if we are talking about the recovery process that we are dealing with at the moment, which is necessary, which is obviously the way forward. But from my point of view, we should actually combine this recovery process also with rethinking and also redesigning and rebuilding the tourism sector based on the analysis that I made before to come to a real new normal. And to answer the question, Anna, what means from my point of view resilient tourism, I would say resilient tourism covers 4 main pillars. The first is about innovation and adaptation. That means what we need is, from my point of view, an integrative application, also constant streamlining of future-oriented and coherent tourism development approaches. So I'm talking about the ABC of tourism management. We have to be more creative, we have to be more agile, and we have also to find decentralized solutions for destination management, and also to think about the diversification of our tourism product and also about our markets, just to mention some examples. And the second major pillar from my point of view when it comes to resilient tourism is about anticipation and transformation. So it means, finally, for me, we need a regular observation of new developments, of new trends, and also a timely initiation of strategic and operational modification processes. So it is all about flexibility and changeability. So we have to anticipate new developments, such as with Airbnb. I think we overslept a little bit the whole development that came with Airbnb for the accommodation sector. Just to mention one example, what I mean with anticipation and with transformation. And the third pillar is about prevention and mitigation. So I think it is needed to think about an early identification and also taking adequate measures to avoid, or at least to minimize, negative effects of internal or external stress factors that I mentioned before. So it's also about security and stability if we are talking about resilience. And finally, it's about protection and preservation.
We have to do a switch from consumerism, from overuse, from trying to do as much as possible to be as sustainable as possible. And if we look at tourism, I mean, Adriatic coast is mostly known for mass tourism, even its most, let's call it, delicate locations, most famous locations that could be managed a little bit different, like Dubrovnik or similar in Croatia, they are just mass tourism. I think for Slovenia or for Montenegro or for many countries, the current events are showing us that mass tourism is probably not the way forward. That we will have to switch something, that we will have to do something. And one of the things that is quite popular right now, if we jump to next slide, is e-mobility. So electric cars are really, really becoming to be popular right now. We are in an era that we are also experiencing a big switch in our mobility, not just on the, let's call it technical side, not just on the side that we are switching from gasoline and diesel cars to electric cars, but also on the ways that we are looking at mobility, that we are looking at it more and more as, let's call it as a service. And that is a big deal that will also have an influence on tourism. It sure can. I mean, when we're talking about, you know, switching to electric cars, it will happen sooner or later, unless some new technology comes along in this time. But you know, we have a lot of cars on the road, and it's not, even if we would I don't know, forbid selling of anything but electric cars today, that would still mean that we would need to spill over to owners of older and older used cars. It would still take us 10, 15, maybe 20 years, depending on the country, which is good because the infrastructure needs to be built, and it cannot be built overnight, and it should not be built overnight, because if you build it overnight, you will overbuild it, and then again, we are out of the sustainable and green area. But when we come to the state, yeah, it has its place. I mean, there are people that say that there should be no subsidies for electric cars, which might be true. I mean, personally, I think there is still a place for subsidies for, I don't know, for a foreseeable future, for a few years at least, until, I don't know, at least, let's call it, I don't know, 5 or 10% of the cars on the road are electric. But then again, the bigger part, that's what we see in Slovenia, of the state influence should be forcing the organizations that are managing the infrastructure. So forcing the energy providers, the energy grid maintainers, forcing the bureaucracy that directs or allows or disallows when you can put, I don't know, a solar power plant or charging station. So they would have, state has to do that. They have to provide a baseline for, with the advent of e-mobility, of shared mobility, it will change a little bit. You will combine different modes of travel when being a tourist. The other thing is, what we've learned is that there is a lot of people that are prepared to spend more money on being sustainable. Cars, electric cars are showing us that. I mean, the first cars that came on the market were quite expensive. Only now we are getting cheaper, but still, if you compare just the basic price, they are more expensive. If you compare the total cost of ownership, not anymore. But they are prepared to pay more, and I believe that they are prepared to pay more also in tourism for stuff like that. So one of the things that we were discussing here at Porsche Slovenia was, is there a way to combine those two things? And we found, we are trying to find this kind of matches, and we for example, we have now one that we are just starting to cooperate with, but it is, I think it's quite interesting. That's why I chose it actually for this presentation, because it seems quite interesting to me. If we go to next slide, and because we know what do we need in tourism right now? We need green destinations, of course, and that means that they are powered with green energy. We need the transport to the locations, between the locations, because some people, or a lot of people, don't want to just stay in one location. They want to explore. They would like to explore the whole country. But then again, if that means driving around a mass of tourists in a diesel rent-a-cars, that's not sustainable. You put them into electric cars. You guide them to green destinations, so the destinations that are ecological, that are powered by green power, that have their own, I don't know, solar powers, so that are using locally produced food, and so on and so on. So basically, you put in front of them an itinerary to see the best in the country, but do it in an ecological way. And also, what is extremely important here is that it's not only a tourist solution. So if you want to do it, you have to build infrastructure. All these tourism providers have to have their green energy. They have to have this, I don't know, solar arrays. You have to set up charging stations for cars. And that means that you are also doing something for the country itself. So you're
The world is overrun with sharp inequalities. With financial instability and pressing environmental challenges, it's time to rethink our future. We bring smart discussions to the table, mapping the benefits of a circular economy, discovering innovation for the future, meeting our climate change promises, preparing for the future of tourism. Join changemakers from across the world for 2 days of inspiration, green impact, and sustainable innovation.